Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
I took care of your disabled father for 10 years, and now that he is gone, he decided to get rid of me like a piece of junk. The woman's outrage was unparalleled. I gave up my favorite job, postponed the birth of our children, and all for your sake, so that you could continue to advance in your career, and you, scoundrel, found another. Not only that, but she has a child with you. Claire grabbed her purse and ran out of the apartment. Claire and Jordan had been married for 10 years. They met at a college party and never separated again. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." The first night they met, Jordan said boldly, "Yeah, come by." Claire readily agreed. Every morning a whistle sounded under her window, followed by a not-too-loud whistle. "Claire, the carriage is here." Looking up to Claire's window on the 5th floor, Jordan was already standing below, with a briefcase under his armpit. Just then, Claire's black head, with its wavy curls, appeared in the open flame and her usual, now Jordan." 3 minutes later, Claire would jump out of the doorway, and the long Jordan would take another briefcase, a girl's briefcase, under her armpit. They returned from class together, too. 6 months of meetings were enough for them to realize that they were made for each other. "Where are you going, to the library?" Claire asked her cheerful classmate. "Yeah, you." "Are you going there, too?" And the young people walked together. "Shall we go to the movies?" suggested Jordan, and I was just dreaming of a new movie. Claire was excited. Movies, books, and music, they liked the same things, or almost the same things. Even in the student cafeteria, everything was resolved to the advantage of both of them. He loved the crumb of bread, she the crusts, and by ordering the vinaigrette, Claire always knew that the peas, which she couldn't stand, would be sparingly eaten by Jordan. "Just look at these misers. It's a natural plushkin with a box. They have every trip to the canteen so profitable." Their buddies laughed, pointing their fingers at the couple. Even with the current abundance of everything in the stores, it was not difficult. Christopher, his son and daughter-in-law, did all his errands perfectly. He was content, although he was very sad after the sudden death of his wife 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He had grown fond of the cheerful, troublesome daughter-in-law. "Claire, you look so much like Jordan, Mama," he told her often. "Just as troublesome and never angry. And my Betty, she was just as easygoing." Claire would rush to hug a sad Christopher. Come on now. Come on, it's all right, we're here." The elderly man tried to discreetly wipe away involuntary tears, and soon got used to the lightning visits of Claire, who, whirlwind carried around his small apartment, immediately put it in order. "Christopher," she shouted from his bedroom, "do you want that old shabby chair? Why don't we throw it away, and Jordan will bring you a new one tomorrow?" Christopher instantly forgot about the sadness and ran as hard as he could to save his favorite chair, as old and dilapidated as he was. Next time, as soon as her father-in-law's mood became sad, she again found something just as precious and frightened him with the expulsion of the precious object to the garbage. The father-in-law piously believed that his daughter-in-law's efforts were caused solely by her love of order and new things. He didn't realize how Claire was laughingly telling her husband in the evening, "Do you know how she scared Daddy today? He's sitting there looking at an old picture, you know. Remember your mom? Oh, him again. He was upset. You know, he loved Mom very much." "Yeah, I know." Claire stopped him. "I wanted to distract him. I frightened him with the chair that time, and today I threatened to throw away the antique clock, the one that doesn't work, and my father was so angry with me before I left. Young people nowadays don't understand anything about good things. Young people just want to spend money, and the chair will last 100 years. Oh, he can do that. He smiled at Jordan. I can imagine how many hours he grumbled when you left. Let him. Claire waved her hand lightly. At least he didn't sit around crying and crying. A little stress improves his vitality, but dinner must have calmed him down, said Jordan, leaning back in his chair and stroking his stomach. You've never cooked as good as you did tonight, Claire. Satisfied Claire smiled contentedly and immediately commanded, I didn't cook for nothing. I was counting on your help. The dishes are yours. Get to the sink now, come on. Of course, it was purely symbolic labor, washing dishes after a delicious dinner, but my wife was pleased. She was spinning around, serving, then a fork, then a spoon, then wiping everything washed clean, and putting it in its place. Not work, but pure pleasure, the continuation of communication, all the more joyful that now the couple did not see each other during the day. Claire came home early from her work, so that she took care of her father-in-law more and more often. Everything flowed smoothly until one day Claire was interrupted from work by a call from Jordan. Claire. He was almost shouting into the phone. Dad's having a stroke. My neighbor Clara called me. She's already called an ambulance, but I can't leave. I have a meeting with the Chinese in 10 minutes, you know. I'll be right there. Claire got right to the point. I'm on my way. I'll call you later. And she was already rushing down the corridor to warn her superiors, putting on her coat and forgetting about her boots. And so she arrived at the hospital. Only getting out of the cab, she saw that she would have to walk through the puddles in her shoes. Confused, she stood by the car, not knowing where to go. I'm sorry. The cab driver waved his hands. You can't go any further? You see the barrier? Claire looked at him uncomprehendingly and silently walked forward, looking for the main entrance with her eyes. She was in a hurry, as if something depended on her there, in the ward where Christopher was. Only at the emergency room did Claire realize that she would not be allowed into any room. Stroke patients were taken to the intensive care unit while it was still possible to prevent major complications from the stroke. There was no way anyone would be allowed in. The confused Claire, holding her coat in her hands, stood at the door to the intensive care unit for so long that the nurses and orderlies who ran by began to squint at her. Finally, one of them, touched by Claire's lost look, stopped and asked, What are you waiting for, woman? We have father here, and began to explain that she and her husband were at work, that they had been told about the intensive care unit, and that she didn't know what to do. What is the name of the patient? With a brief nod, the nurse left, and soon the doctor, a tall, stern brunette, came out of the ward. Well, who's here? She said her father-in-law's name, although there was only one Claire in the hallway. Me, how is he? Is he alive? Claire bailed. He's alive if he's here. The doctor replied in a low voice. What are you, his daughter? A daughter-in-law, but still a daughter. Claire said hurriedly, as if something depended on her words. Your father suffered an ischemic stroke, and he's still in serious condition. Leave your phone number so I can contact you at any time. Could it get any worse? Claire was scared. Anything can happen in this life. The patient is stable. He's conscious. We need your phone number so that we can call you when we move him to a regular ward. He will need constant care. He is a bedridden patient. What do I need to do? What should I prepare? Claire was worried all over again. Here's a list of things to take with you to the hospital. The doctor pointed to a poster. Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. A bewildered Claire lowered her arms, then suddenly realized, Oh, thank you very much, doctor. Have a good day. The doctor was already closing the door behind her, but Claire had time to see a long row of catalogs on which lay men and women. As far as Claire could make out, covered only by sheets, next to them, like cranes on long legs, were racks of IVs. "Where are you, Christopher?" She tried to look out for Claire, but the door slammed shut in a second, a click sounding. Claire was already on the phone, the worried husband. "Claire, where are you? What have you got? Did you make it?" The stream of questions seemed never-ending. Finally, Jordan stopped talking and Claire was able to answer. "Yes, Jordan, I'm at the hospital. Christopher's in intensive care. They won't let me see him. He's in stable condition. I talked to the doctor, but Dad's conscious. What about him? Are you sure it's a stroke? Is there any hope he'll recover?" I was worried on the other end of the line. "Yes, as soon as the injections work and he feels better, he'll be moved to a room." "I'll be right there." "Wait for me, Claire." "Stay there. Just where is it?" She explained where it was and added, "Only you can't go through the grounds. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital courtyard on the square side." In 10 minutes she was already sitting in a warm, cozy car and once again detailed everything again. And as soon as he is transferred to a regular ward, someone must be with him all the time because there is not enough staff to take care of every stroke patient. We don't know what condition he's in yet. For the time being, in any case, there will be bed rest, feeding, washing. The nannies can't manage it all. "Claire, you realize I can't quit my job, right? I just signed a contract with the Chinese partners. I just need to be on site." Jordan was upset. Claire already realized what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. "But this is the men's room." "Jordan, how will I be there?" "I don't know." Jordan was confused. "Why don't you call and find out? Do it in the morning, honey, and you'll do a better job. You've always been in touch with Daddy. You know roughly what he needs and how to treat him, don't you?" When a sudden disaster strikes, people start looking for a way out. There is always someone they know who has already experienced the same or similar in their lives. So it happened with Claire. Coming to work in the morning, she saw the sympathetic looks of her colleagues, began to ask questions. "Oh, Claire, how are you doing? How's your father-in-law?" "Alive, I hope." "How are you?" "How's Christopher?" The questions came one after another. All 5 women, sitting in the same office, had become friends and were aware of each other's family affairs. It turned out that the oldest of them, Doris, had once cared for a paralyzed aunt, and Lara, who had just joined the team, also had experience with her grandmother, who had suffered a stroke, but relatively mild. The first thing to do is to ask the doctor about painkillers, Doris stated. At first their pain is severe. It prevents them from starting exercises and workouts. Massage should be done lightly to relax the paralyzed side. "Oh, girls," Claire begged. "Thank you, but can I ask you to explain it all over again?" "Yes, of course," Doris and Lyra said almost in unison. "I haven't seen him. I don't know anything about his condition. By the time I get there, I'll have forgotten everything you told me." "Well, we're always in touch, Claire." Lara reassured her. "They'll tell you everything. Every sick person is looked after by someone, a wife or a daughter." "Yes," Claire was surprised. "I was afraid it was a men's ward." "Yes, it is now." Doris even laughed. "Men don't go in such places, my dear. You have to save your strength, and it's a woman's job to clean up the dirt and carry the pots out. What's it to them, heroes? They won't trifle. They'll run away in half an hour." Claire was a little hurt by the woman's words, but they were true. At least Jordan could also take at least a week's vacation, so what if they were Chinese? Surely they are not more important than his own father. There was some truth in Doris's words. There was no escaping it. She called the hospital in the afternoon, and they reassured her that it was still a short time, but that the patient's condition was normal after such a blow. If everything goes according to plan, then tomorrow perhaps will be transferred to a regular ward. Having calmed down a little, Claire finished the day's work, but just in case she arranged for a vacation. The boss was understanding, but only asked her to warn the girls in the department. Claire, you always help your colleagues. Make sure that this time they are always ready to cover for you and keep the department on top of things. I will, Claire replied confidently. Our girls are great, they understand. She spent the whole day explaining things to Lara. It was supposed that she would substitute for those who had gone on vacation for the first time, which would be convenient for everyone, and at the same time she would get into the flow faster and learn different types of operations. At the same time, Claire, for some reason, could not get Doris' words about men out of her head. Walking home from work, through the quiet evening streets, she decided to put an end to this moving tangle of unpleasant feelings. At dinner at home, she looked straight into Jordan's eyes and asked, Jordan, you love your father, don't you? Why don't you at least try, yourself, to take a few days to be near him? He'd be glad. I'd love to. Jordan answered hotly, but as I explained to you, this is the time when things are going to get busy. If we miss the moment, someone without me will screw up, and then goodbye, foreign partners. Claire seemed to calm down. But you know, I'm actually sure that Dad will be quite comfortable with you, and that's important in his condition. Jordan continued as if, unlike Claire, he knew his father's condition much more than she did. Honey, you see we could hire a nurse, but she'd be a complete stranger, and I want Dad to be with just us. We. Claire was again struck by the inappropriateness of that pronoun after the sentences her husband had just uttered. Well, obviously, I can't be around him all the time. I have a job, but I'll stop by as often as I can to buy whatever he and you need. Please, Claire, will you do it? What's your job worth to you? It's a nerve-wracking job, and here you're busy and at home and everything. But I can't be torn between two houses. And who's going to feed you? Clean the house, cook your things. Claire, really, I'm not without a hand, and I'm 2 years old. The woman, a little hesitated, agreed, and from the next day, began her new duties. Christopher was indeed transferred to the ward the day after tomorrow. Having arrived with a large bag of what she considered necessary, Claire saw that her father-in-law was already lying on a high special bed. His eyes were closed, the skin on his face and hands glowing with dead poverty. A fat, small nurse showed Claire the duck, toilet, and bath, explained the daily routine in a businesslike manner, and fled. The 3 women who were here, some with their husbands, some with their brothers or sons, looked at Claire with curiosity and sympathy. The neighbors helped her identify things, getting to know each other little by little. Meanwhile, Christopher opened his eyes and wheezed something. He was begging for a drink. The neighbor realized. She immediately took the drinker and showed Claire how to handle it. Lifting the old man's head, she tried as carefully as possible to give him a drink, but the water poured past him. The father-in-law groaned unhappily. Jordan? He whispered, almost wheezed. He's at work, Christopher. He'll come. He couldn't yet. He's got foreigners there. Claire reassured the old man. Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere. Slowly, they both adjusted to life in the hospital. It wasn't easy. Christopher, who had always been characterized by intelligence and patience, suddenly became tearful, could get cranky. "No, I won't have porridge. I can't swallow it," and he would sharply push the plate away with his healthy hand. Fortunately, he was affected by the side of the brain that does not affect speech. Intelligence didn't seem to be affected either. Only by comparing her previous interactions with the man did she realize the damage the disease had done to a man she respected. She already knew there would be outbursts of anger, groans of muscle pain, and even delirium at night. The old man, in his position, no longer had to think about shyness, since her father-in-law could not support himself, and little by little he developed the kind of trusting relationship with Claire that only a child has with its mother or nanny. All of this Claire endured. 3 weeks of treatment in the nightmarish conditions of a city hospital, with poor provision, finally came to an end. Claire said goodbye to her kind neighbors, but then a new shift of patients and caregivers had partially entered the ward. Christopher, so cordial and polite before, barely looked at his neighbors in the ward. He was all wrapped up in the cocoon of his own illness. Claire, it was a good thing. The ward is calm, even if a little depressed, and there is a complete change in his and Christopher's life. "Jordan, I ordered a pass to the territory. You drive up, right to the entrance." In the tone of an expert dispatcher, the command was to her husband on the morning of their discharge. Jordan came to pick them up in a large, comfortable car. In his arms, he carried his father from the hospital gurney into the salon. At home in the apartment had to go up only to the 2nd floor. Now Claire was with her sick father-in-law. Just gradually Claire's life returned to normal. True, now she could not find a job in her specialty, but Jordan consoled her again. "Get some rest. You need it now. Look at the weight you've lost, Claire. Get strong. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure you don't deny yourself anything. Let's see what it's like to be a housewife." Claire smiled sadly. In her new position, she found a silver lining. She read a lot, watched movies, decorated her and Jordan's cozy apartment. It turned out that things at home never end. The more you do, the more new things arise. Even at her father-in-law's, constantly obeying the wishes of the sick, she was not so busy. Now, however, it was a very welcome, spiritualized business, the troubles and joy. Having completed a small renovation of her somewhat neglected, over the years apartment, Claire was going to take care of her own health. The young woman decided to undergo an examination in the clinic and prepare for long-postponed motherhood. She had long dreamed of having children, and now her husband would have no excuses. Claire discovered that right next to their home, a new clinic opened, quite impressive looking. The flow of patients to this clinic did not expire, which inspired her faith in the reliability and professionalism of the doctors working there. She quickly found the clinic's website on the internet and called the number and made an appointment with the doctor. The doctor, by all accounts, was a good one. The walls of her offices in the paid clinic were full of all kinds of diplomas and diplomas. Having carefully examined Claire, the doctor said to her, "I rarely see healthy women, to tell you the truth. I don't see any health problems with you, so you can get dressed." Continuing to take notes, she pronounced, "Still, don't delay getting pregnant. After all, 32 years old, even by today's standards. Actually, that's what we were planning," lied Claire, expressing her dream. "The longer you think about planning, the harder it will be for you to carry a baby. The clock is ticking," smiled the gynecologist. She thanked for the recommendations and left the doctor's office. At last she felt light and calm. After a rainy, cold summer, the weather was great, which is rare in August. It was even hot, and the coolness of the evening was so welcome. The maples glistened with green paws of leaves. The birch trees spread their long strands along the whole alley. It was a shame that such a lovely day would be wasted if it wasn't used for a walk, to breathe in as much fresh air as possible, filled with the fragrance of greenery and flowers. God, it's beautiful, Claire gasped. No way I will not sit in four walls. The young woman decided to go to Krister's apartment, which had been empty for about a year. It should have been cleaned up long ago. At least some of the unnecessary junk should have been thrown out. Some of the things left behind should have been taken away. From the stop, Claire went not straight ahead, but down the long path. Still unable to escape the gloom, the old apartment from the bright sunshine and clean air. The keys to her father-in-law's apartment she carried with her, a long-standing habit. Opening the door, she took a step inside, but barely entered the hallway, she realized that the dwelling was quite habitable. At that very moment, much to her surprise, a 2-year-old boy came out of the room and stared at her with his little eyes. Just then, apparently his mother came out of the kitchen. She was an attractive woman who was clearly no more than 25 to 24 years old. "Who are you?" Claire asked in astonishment. "And what are you doing here?" "I'm Adriana. This is my son, Noah. We live here." The young woman didn't seem confused at all, but she wasn't surprised at Claire's arrival. "What right do you have to be here?" Claire was even more surprised. "This is my husband's apartment, Jordan, and who are you?" The stranger felt quite in her own right, standing firmly on her feet, and she wasn't going to answer to anyone, even if it was someone who opened the door with her own keys. "Apparently, I'm your husband's wife." She hummed stupidly and walked across the apartment without asking permission. Adriana, taking the baby in her arms, followed her everywhere. Claire found many changes in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. Christopher's bed was gone, replaced by a new, wide 4-poster bed. When Claire saw it, she wrinkled her nose. A sexodrome, and what kind of vulgar canopy over it? She was so disgusted to see the apparently shared bed of her husband and his mistress. And now what? Take up the knife, strike, as they say. The wardrobe in the bedroom was new, though inexpensive. Claire knew good things, but this was clearly an attempt to save money. Or had Adriana brought it from her possessions? It didn't matter at all. For some reason, however, Claire clung to every object, to the slightest change in the interior. She noted the beautiful mirror, set in a beautiful frame, and the expensive cosmetics in front of it, on the dressing table. The apartment was quite clean, but there was no sense of style and coziness created by women's hands. It was a little bit of everything. There were heavy purchases, Jordan, as if the furniture was brought directly from the house of Sobakevich Nice. Good value, insignificant trifles obviously belonged to Adriana, and also there was a lot of what was left from the previous owner, Krister Hera. Grounded and ageless. A bookcase with numerous books and albums. A fundamental desk in the hall, or a real wooden closet for clothes in the bedroom. Strangely, this diversity of everything, the diversity of the surroundings, made it easier for Claire to accept her husband's apparent, accomplished, and long-standing adultery. Everything around was so unstable, unfounded, that she simply let the fact pass through her, not taking it to heart, or it was the first fever, the body's defensive reaction to stress. Both women were silent. She walked around the apartment, sat on the couch in the living room. "Is that Jordan's son?" she finally asked, looking at the baby's cute face. "Yes," Adriana answered calmly and evenly. "How long have you been here?" Claire asked. "Since Jordan, we have been here for 5 years," Adriana answered. 5 years? Claire bit her lip. So by the time her husband cheated on her, she had already served 5 years as a sister of mercy under her father, and for the next 5 years, her husband had enjoyed spending time with this girl, was apparently happy with her. She felt either a chill or the sensation of being splashed with ice water. He always told me to wait a while, that his wife was an invalid, and that's why he couldn't leave her. His wife needed constant care, and who would he be if he left her so helpless, couldn't part with her, pity her? Oh, pity? Claire didn't notice herself grinning ironically. Where did you meet then? At my house. Adriana answered simply. He kept promising me, saying he'd be free soon, and then we'd be together forever. How long have you lived here? For some reason, Claire asked. It's almost a year since he finally moved me and my son into his apartment, answered the interlocutor still as calmly. So I'm dead, and now there's nothing stopping you from being together. Claire sneered, unable to resist. It would appear so. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't what Jordan said. I love him and I believed what he said. Without any embarrassment, Adriana said. For some reason she had decided that she could tell her husband's wife everything in detail, and that it was even necessary to do so. Serenely patting her son on the back, she looked peacefully at Claire with her small eyes, framed by absolutely cow's lashes, tastelessly augmented, in a medium-sized salon. And she kept talking as if to a friend, retelling the story of her acquaintance with Jordan. I, myself, am a newcomer. I didn't pass the competition at the Institute, so I studied to be a hairdresser. My mother said don't go back to the district, stay here. Her sister has been living here for a long time, my aunt. She's lonely, so she got attached to me. I clean her floors, help her bathe, give her groceries, she feels good. So my aunt tells me, you, Adriana, you better finish hairdressing courses and earn money like people. Who need your institutes? That's right, I thought I'd go and learn. I grasped it on the fly, and now I'm working in a salon, men's hairdresser. Then again, Aunt Cindy made me do it. You don't know anything, Adriana. You need to get married. And where does a decent man always go? At the barber shop. Adriana looked at Claire apprehensively and bit her tongue. But Claire didn't care about her. Slowly, a bitter, soul-cutting truth began to creep in. She sits in a love nest and listens to the story of her husband's mistress. Could she have ever imagined such a thing? Yes, she couldn't have dreamed it. Simplicity is worse than stealing. Claire exhaled, looking at herself, and suddenly realized why she felt so bad. Until then, she had been sitting there without breathing, tense and tense. What? Perplexed asked Adriana, and without waiting for an answer continued. Well, in general, since the hall is male, there are many men every day, but Jordan, he is not like all of them. She looked at Claire again and finally blushed. Claire saw her neck blush, then pink patterns appeared on her chest. Her whole face turned ugly red too. Claire tried not to look at her. She hated to listen. The revelations to her young rival. Would you please call him from your number? She asked, holding back as best she could. Adriana obediently dialed the number, and after a few seconds, Jordan's familiar voice sounded in the receiver. Yes, Adriana, is something wrong? Claire took the phone from her hands and spoke. You're such a jerk, Claire. Jordan's voice sounded confused. What are you doing in there? How could you? How could you? Claire, come home. I'll explain everything to you. Jordan, of course, could not say anything else at the moment. He was simply dumbfounded. What can you explain to me? That while I was taking care of your sick father, you started a new family, lived a life of pleasure? You're a lowlife, a scumbag, a scum. Do you understand? And I don't want to see you ever." She shoved the phone into the hand of a stunned Adriana and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door. She walked away, tears streaming down her eyes. "Traitor, scoundrel, traitor." Claire mentally scolded her husband. "He has the child, and me. What about me?" Claire had always dreamed of having children from the very first days of her marriage, but she had never been able to get pregnant. Many times she would go to the doctor, but each time Jordan would talk her out of it. And then, while caring for a sick old man, thoughts of having a child of her own left Claire. There was no time for that. Still, in her heart, she hoped that she was not the one to blame for the couple's inability to give birth. Going to the doctor had made her so happy, she believed that all was not lost. But now she has and will have nothing, no family, no children, no job. No one needs her, no one at all, not even herself. If she knew why Jordan's passport had turned so brightly pink, something she hadn't and couldn't tell anyone about, perhaps Adriana's story would have dispelled her a little. Claire, by virtue of her good heart, would even feel a little sorry for this distant girl who had seen nothing good in life. Not distant, but Adriana had become wise beyond her years, and with good reason. Adriana never saw her father and never knew him. Her mother only waved away her daughter's inquiries like an annoying fly and drunkenly said, "Fuck him. Remember him." Adriana's mother was drinking. Not only that, it was absolutely indiscriminate on acquaintance, Galena. She had 3 children by different fathers, and laughing, she told one of her sons, "God knows, Ethan, from whom I gave birth to you, I lived with John, and James was next door, so he came by and mended the porch." And she laughed unabashedly. The daughter was still alone, and her mother seemed to love her more than her sons, called her Adriana, her daughter, and even occasionally bought her a new dress. Of course, when there was money from a drunken suitor, and that didn't happen very often. The Boyds would not be lost, her mother thought. The army and prison would not let them starve to death. The country needed men. On the outskirts of their village, almost in the middle of nowhere, stood only the high fences of the camp, and many kilometers farther away stood the same settlers' settlements where the released prisoners had settled down. Moors in the settlement were most cruel. The licentiousness of the former prisoners bordered on anarchy, and the hard work in the wilderness, where there is nothing to do but lumbering, left no strength for other pleasures than drinking and debauchery. As usual, 15-year-old Adriana was quickly used by one of her mother's friends, taking advantage of her simplicity and the absence of her mother. Then showed her a knife, not scaring her much. This Adriana was enough to keep quiet. And so they lived until the girl, with sinfulness, graduated from school. The mother's lover went to the girl as soon as the mother got drunk or went somewhere, even for a short time. Then Adriana was already surprised by the miracle. For 3 years she never got pregnant. Her mother's roommate was a relatively young and seemingly handsome man. Perhaps it was still trying on the girl with the position of his secret mistress. Sometimes in a good mood, he praised Adriana for dignity, incomparable with the appearance of the mother, who with every drink became a terrible, sprawled-across old woman. Knowing that her mother had a sister in a distant city, Adriana convinced her mother by crying and constant persuasion that she should go there. Her mother wrote a tearful letter to her sister, and her aunt agreed to take her niece in for the first time. The rest of Adriana's story, Claire, was almost true, except for the legend of the institute. What institute? For the uneducated daughter of an alcoholic? The school in the village gave knowledge that was only enough to live in the village. It is true that exiled intellectuals from the capital's universities used to work at this school and even trained a few medalists, but that was so long ago. And those who received these medals left the terrible land as quickly as their teachers, who had finished their term of exile. In short, Adriana had settled into the city quite well. Not bad at all, if you remember where she came from and who she was. Now she was in a pretty prestigious place, and she was going out of her way to please both the customers and the boss. "Come in, please." She stretched her lips in a welcoming way in front of Jordan, who came in for a haircut. "How shall we cut his hair?" "Well, it's up to you." Jordan smiled back. He was happy to see a new face. "You've studied, but I haven't. And you've probably studied more than I have." Adriana frowned modestly. "Engineer or professor?" Jordan laughed at the girl's unsophisticated compliment and asked, "And you are new. Where Claire?" Claire was the name of his regular hairdresser, of a very respectable weight and no less respectable age. "Yes, I've been hired to replace her on a trial basis, and they said I'd see what happens." Claire's retired. "Enough," she says. "Her legs have sprouted pillars by the chair. I'll dig in the vegetable garden and move to a country house. Except for onion shoots, I will not cut anything in my life. That's enough." Adriana laughed merrily. Jordan gave in to her fun and joined in. From the very first meeting, an extraordinary ease settled between them. Not for nothing, apparently, there is an opinion that love is chemistry. This gravitation of two, the desire to connect, and appeared in an instant, as soon as he saw Jordan Adriana. Without thinking, he wanted to see her again, to be closer to her. Then he realized that Adriana reminded him of the young Claire, the same mischievous eyes and dark curls. But that realization came much later, when he realized what a trap he had fallen into the moment he had decided to meet the young hairdresser after work. Adriana is so innocent and youthful, fresh as Jordan thought. Looking at her dark blonde curls and slender figure, she appeared to be very skillful in lovemaking. How was Jordan to know what and how the released prisoner had taught her 3 whole years in the settlement? Having arrived in the city, Adriana did not lead a monastic life either. Before entering the prestigious salon where she met Jordan, she had traveled the thorny path of an apprentice and was building up her hand, which it must be admitted she excelled at. She started out cutting and shaving men in a station barber shop, and what kind of people did not fall to her? One of the occasional customers, a smashing little guy who also came from the province and settled in the city in the auto shop, captivated her heart and became a constant lover. Chuckling, he told her, "You catch the customer by the beard, do you hear? We'll catch a daddy with you, you and the pleasure of it will get. All I will be easier, and even more money from him to make money. And we with you in the summer on his money, and to the sea. You say too." Adriana sulked. "I love you alone. Do I need some daddy? Love me. Who won't let you, you fool?" Lover laughed happily. "And don't let your daddy out of your hands if you get him." And he strong hand rolls the girl on a joint bed. Recently, the couple began to rent a common room. It's economical and convenient. So about a date with Jordan, allegedly on her living space, Adriana lied without blinking an eye. In fact, having become close in an instant, she and Jordan made love right in Claire's apartment. Moreover, in her own bed, knowing that Claire, she would hardly have been able to have such a quiet conversation with Adriana for such a long time. But a decent person usually sees in another a person like herself, and it could not even occur to Claire how far human baseness could extend. After all, she came to her house only briefly while Christopher slept. Sometimes he was under the care of a nurse who, for a small fee, would visit the sick man to give him an IV of medication for support. The treatment lasted about an hour, and longer with a massage. Claire was on the run making dinner. Jordan cleaned up abandoned things, and not once did the thought of what was going on here without her at night creep up on her. Yes, her husband called her often, at each call asking what she and her father should bring. And also when, at what hour she would be, in their shared apartment, it didn't bother her at all. She didn't even pay attention to her husband's unusual meticulousness. On the contrary, it was pleasant his attention, waiting, counting the hours, let's go to my place. I want to treat you to a great coffee. Hiding his eyes, proposed Jordan, Adriana, for the first time, about a week after we met. It was already late evening, and they left the cozy cafe where they had spent several evenings. Kissing and cuddling in the car interior, a grown man and a blossoming woman, did not satisfy. Both wanted to continue. And your wife? Adriana was a little surprised. The rest didn't bother her. That was the way she was. Wife, didn't I tell you? Jordan was a little confused, although he had warned Adriana about being married right away. He would be honest with this nice girl. Adriana immediately made it clear that it was impossible to meet at her place, because she lived at her aunt's place, although perfectly continued to share a room together with her former lover. She intuitively felt what and when to say, when to smile, and when to open up to meet a man. Having acquired an urban appearance, the girl also learned the ability to behave discreetly. She could not be taught to deceive. She did it brilliantly. But to keep silent where necessary, to create an image of a well-bred, well-mannered maiden, this skill had to be learned as best as possible and preferably faster. Adriana was learning. She watched the men. They showed their feelings even more vividly than women. They turned out to be excellent teachers. Say the wrong thing, and the handsome guy would snap like the last skier. A chiseled guy could get a square swear if he got the wrong haircut. Compliment, affectionate smile, worked wonders. Knave men bought them like children. Barbershop became for Adriana a kind of institute of noble maidens. She could portray any gait, any smile, from a simple and naughty girl to a price-conscious beauty, expanded her art of reincarnation. Of course, these charms applied only to men, and any woman could immediately recognize Adriana in 5 minutes. But men were coming, and for 5-minute seduction, fuse, and talent, Adriana had enough. Fascinated by Adriana's youth and the novelty of his own position, free, in love, Jordan, as if plowing in weightlessness, but had to decide what to do next. And so he decided. My wife is an invalid, he said, and after a satisfied look at the girl's surprised face, he continued, I periodically put her in the hospital to heal, but pity her, she is also a person. I could not praise myself. What a good boy. Now he wouldn't have to explain to Adriana why there were women's things in his apartment. At the same time, he made a deposit for future meetings with her. The base is a word. Adriana, not suspecting that decent-looking men, too, can lie, easily accepted his proposal and surprised Jordan, liberation and temperament, their first night together. The next day, the ardent lover could think of nothing else but another night, and Adriana again behaved with complete freedom, and he was easy and simple with her. And Claire, what of Claire? She hadn't bothered him in a long time. Talking only about diapers and medications and a new Bedsores mattress, anyone's feelings would fade, and he's a living man. He's a man, after all, a successful one, by the way. There was not a single decent acquaintance of his who did not have a permanent mistress, and now it was his turn too. He could afford an expensive beauty. But he liked this cute hairdresser, although it would be better without this job in the service industry, of course. Somehow it is not prestigious. After a couple months of lovemaking, he decided that he didn't have to show Adriana to anyone, but if anything, he wouldn't be ashamed to pass with her. Acquaintances will only smack, looking at the lush forms of his girlfriend. But to confess that your mistress works in a beauty salon, haircuts, and shaves other men, it is somehow not comical. Adriana, you should quit that job, he said, resting after the raucous entertainment. Adriana lifted her dark head from his shoulder and looked into his eyes. When are we to be married? Jordan, strangely enough, was not ready for marriage with a live wife, so he took the conversation aside. Adriana, soon I'll rent you an apartment, so we'll be there, we'll see each other more easily and freely. And my wife, she's not a bad person, she suffers. Poor thing. I try to create all conditions for her, of course, but the disease it progresses. I'd be an asshole if I left her now. You'd be the first to judge me, darling. And he rushed to kiss Adriana, showering her with compliments, and Adriana laughed again, forgetting her purpose. Adriana could wait a long time, but here she was not forced to do anything. After seeing Jordan off, she pulled the curtain on the window, a sign to her roommate that the entrance to her apartment was available. He had moved out immediately from the old small apartment to this one, rented for Adriana by Jordan, and the presence of men's things. Adriana easily explained to Jordan that her brother, a student, often visited her on weekends. She couldn't deny him a vacation and a full meal at her sister's house, could she? Jordan's free weekends suited him just fine, and he easily took on his brother's version of the story. His father and Claire were eagerly awaiting him on Saturday and Sunday too. While Jordan was with his father, Claire would get at least a few hours of freedom to clean up, socialize with her friends, at least go to the sauna after all. It turned out that everything worked out marvelously well for everyone. Everything settled down. Adriana finally quit her job. Jordan gave her enough money to support her young lover, but he still decided to keep his job. 2 years into her relationship with Jordan, Adriana suddenly found herself pregnant. She thought that her body was now rested after the stress. She didn't have to live in constant tension, so she was able to conceive. Wow, a kinder was made. Her roommate laughed, neither surprised nor pleased. But you, Adriana, don't count on me. I'm a shitty father. I have such a kinder, probably, all over the country is full of running. So come on, make your daddy happy. He needs an hair. I was just on my way to a construction site. A friend of mine wants me to go. The man, very far from thinking about the family nest, quickly packed his things and drove off in an unknown direction. Most likely not that far away, just to avoid Adriana's eyes. The confused Adriana cried for a long time, abandoned by her constant lover, with whom she had long since gotten over. Jordan arrived, saw her swollen face, and rushed to embrace her. Adriana, what are you doing? Who's hurt you? No one. Adriana sobbed. I'm pregnant. Oh, what a trouble you're in. Jordan laughed. It's wonderful. You'll give birth to a beauty like you. Until now, Jordan had never suspected that the news that he would soon become a father would make him happy. For so many years, he had avoided persistent conversations with Claire about the future birth of a child. Why he had avoided parenthood, Jordan himself could not answer. Not ready, that would be the truth. And here he himself did not understand why, out of a desire to appease his mistress, the acceptance of this unknown infant was suddenly born. With every visit to Adriana, this acceptance grew stronger, and now he himself did not understand why he so desperately refused future fatherhood. living with Claire. Incidentally, it must be said that he continued to have a wonderful relationship with Claire. He showed touching care for his wife, but there had been no intimacy between them for a long time. Claire, a proud and self-sufficient woman, did not touch the subject out of delicacy. There was no need for tenderness. Christopher was dying. He was already 40 days old. Claire had long lived at home, and the couple continued to live as brother and sister. Returning from the gynecologist, Claire was just about to gather the mental strength to decide to have the most important conversation with her husband for the future of their family. It began to rain, but she, as if without noticing it, took among some half-abandoned cottages, not thinking at all about where she was going. The phone in her bag rang insistently, but she paid no attention to it. Only feeling deadly tired, the woman looked around, saw an old bench under a tree, sat down, leaned her head against the rough table, and closed her eyes. At that time, a white-haired little boy was running along the sidewalk, slapping on the puddles, enjoying the splashes that flew from under his bare feet. He tried to run exactly in the middle of the small puddles that had managed to form from the rain, and now they glistened under the light of the lantern. He squealed and laughed joyfully when the splashing water hit his face and carelessly licked the muddy drops off his lips. It was Adam, a 3-year-old little boy who had run away from his loving grandmother, and his great joy from an independent walk. There was no limit. "Adam, I'm in trouble with you," shouted the old lady, trying to catch up with her grandson and not keeping up with him. "Where are you going on the puddles? Stop. I say, you'll catch cold, and you'll have to take care of yourself. Oh, you are my bitter little sorrow." Finally, she managed to pick up the baby, but she immediately let him go, shrieking from the pain that shot through her lower back. She turned to look around for a bench, and only then saw a woman sitting on a bench under a tree. The old woman shuddered fearfully. "Lord, your power! What is it?" The little boy in his grandmother's arms also quieted down when he saw the stranger, and with some fear looked at the pale face of the sitting woman. "Is she alive?" the old woman muttered, slowly approaching the bench. Then she stepped toward Claire and touched her with her hand. "Whose are you going to be, girl? Why are you sitting out here in the rain? What's the matter with you?" Claire opened her eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be right out. I just got lost here by accident. Where would you go in this darkness?" The old woman looked around worriedly. "Well, let's go to my place. It's my house over there." Lifting Claire by the elbow, she continued to speak softly. "I live with my grandson. Is my name Margaret? And this is Adam." The frightened boy looked out from behind Margaret's back. Claire followed the friendly old woman. She had no strength, and she would certainly not have made it home on her own. The place was remote. The phone was dead. There were no cars or cabs around. It was a completely unfamiliar suburb where she had never been in her life. Soon enough they came to an old 2-story house, probably from the time of the first builders. They went up to the 2nd floor and entered a small apartment. Margaret put the kettle on and took her grandson into the bathroom. "I'll only be 5 minutes, darling," she said to Claire. "Otherwise, God forbid he gets sick, I'll warm the child." She quickly bathed Adam in a hot bath and brought him to the kitchen. "Now for some hot tea." After Adam, she also went to the bath and cleaned herself up. The hot shower made her feel better, and she was able to answer Margaret's questions. "I, Margaret, learned a terrible thing today," she began quietly. "I have no husband, no child, no family." "Oh, no," the new acquaintance groaned. "Are they dead?" "No, my husband is alive, even happy. He abandoned me, Margaret, and abandoned me a long time ago, and I was a fool. I lived quietly and trusted the scoundrel. Wanting to talk, the woman told about herself, not hiding any details from the old woman. Why did he do that? I did everything for him, loved, cared, and what happened? I took care of his father for 10 years, and during that time he betrayed me, cheated on me. How can you do that? And the most frustrating thing is that I'm 32 years old and I don't have children. I do not even imagine whether I can even think about men. I dream about a child. 10 years I lived next to my dying father-in-law, and I thought only about a baby. While I look for a new husband, my time will be up. Claire grinned bitterly and sipped the cooled tea. Renewing the brew, the women began the tea party anew. The hostess remembered the forgotten cutlets and warmed them for her new friend. You probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Here, eat this, you'll feel better. Everything seems bad to a hungry person, but on a full stomach it's no trouble at all. Claire only now remembered that in the morning before going to the doctor, she had not eaten anything, thinking that she would have to take tests. Poppy seed in her mouth since last night. She feels completely drained. At first through force, living through a juicy morsel, she gradually got into the flavor. The meat was fragrant with garlic and onions, and with hot tea, Claire ate 3 cutlets and turned a little pink. Margaret began to comfort Claire, and Adam and I, too, were left alone. There are not only men who are unfaithful, there are also enough butterflies among women that fly from flower to flower. They're all looking for the best and the sweetest. Did Adam's mom leave him? Claire guessed. She's beautiful. Why would she bother with a child? She'd rather spread her beauty around the world, live for herself. And that's how deceptive appearances can be, Claire. Was she really beautiful? She took an interest in this family. The son came. Mom, I'm getting married. Here's the bride. Well, I look at her. She looks like a daughter-in-law, a nice girl, lovely to look at. She's tall, straight, looks into the eyes, looks cheerful, and has curls. Now this miracle is made with her own hands, so she knows how to do something, also good. I guess you can't drink water off a face, of course, but my Harry is worth every beauty. It's not good for a mother to praise her child, but my son, he looks like a hero from a picture. He took after my father, and our father was a man to all men. It's all right that he's found a match. God willing, they'll get along happily. Get married. I say the young years are passing. Why grow old alone? Let's have a family. Together you'll look for what you want and build it. I blessed my son. We summoned the guests, celebrated honorably, everything as it should be. Right after the wedding, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and gave birth to Adam. And now, not like before, the little one needs diapers and food, not like nowadays. He doesn't suck a tit, and his food is very expensive, they say, so he started to run out of money. Margaret told how the money shortage started, how she tried to save money and diversify at least the food of the young. She got Piglet, worked from morning till evening on a small vegetable garden, made rolls so that the harvest would not go to waste. But of course it was not enough, and the young wife sat at home more, not helping with the household in any way. She always had an excuse. She had a stomachache. Adam did not let her sleep at night. Adam was capricious. Margaret put up with it too, as long as the child was looked after. But Harry would not spoil her mood because her son tries, works, takes overtime when he can. So we stretched as hard as we could, but we got tired. That's what I'm telling you, Claire. Harry came home from work one day and said he was leaving the workshops. Turns out a friend of his from the army had written him a letter. He didn't write often, but this was just in time. He's been on a business trip for a long time, and he calls Harry to him. He writes to us that we need such people very much. You're not a drinker, handy and ahead, all sorts of tasks, like nuts. He wants Harry to work with him because his partner moved to the south and gave up business trips. He needs to be treated in the sea air, so my Harry has decided he's going to work on a rotational basis. What about your sister-in-law? Did she agree? Claire asked. How could she not? She loved money that she will buy on joy, everything. She liked to dress up a lot, but my grandson was dressed up like a Tsarevich. I kept scolding them, don't spoil the boy like that. He doesn't understand anything yet, and they put new expensive clothes on him every day. They wash them, so he doesn't have time to put them on a second time, as everything is already too small. He grows by leaps and bounds, but life has gotten better, hasn't it? Claire either asked or confirmed. Oh, Claire, on the outside, everything is peaceful. Money seems to have improved, but what's inside a man, you can't see at once. The wife turned out to be a troublemaker. She strayed when Adam was not even a year old. I didn't say a word when I noticed the affair. Harry came to visit. We had a goodbye, he went away, but she's so fussy about it. She's been trying all sorts of ways to get out of the house to deceive me. And she attacked the wrong one. I waited for her until she came back late, smelling of wine. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wandering. Come on, sister-in-law, I told her, sit down next to me and let's talk. Where have you been? Who were you out with? Don't lie to me. I've seen your sister. I'm a woman myself. I know at a glance who breeds what. Well, Claire got excited. So she sat down, her eyes down to the floor, playing the innocent, but she kept silent, and I kept silent. We were sitting like that, and suddenly she started crying. Excuse me, she's crying, Mommy. She called me Mom. She lost her mother long ago. And you? Interest, Claire in the lives of complete strangers, was growing. What about me? My business is old, I told her so. It's not me I'm telling you to live with, sweetheart. You have a husband. And if you think about it, you have a son too. Will you sit like that in front of them? How will you look into their eyes? She cried, and they went to bed. And I didn't sleep all night. I had no peace. And in the morning I fell asleep, so soundly that I didn't hear anything. Only when Adam woke up and began to grunt, I jumped up to him. I looked, and my sister-in-law's bed was empty, and the bed was tidied up neatly as before the guests. I looked in the closet, and there was not a single dress. All I immediately realized, she ran away with her boyfriend, unknown to what distant lands, and she did not take any money. Unless she had a separate amount with her, but I know nothing about that, but I do not have time to sit and cry. So I dressed up my grandson and fed him, took him for a walk and sang songs. That's all. Did you even write or call afterwards? Her only listener was worried. No, Claire, I waited. I think she is a mother, such a wonderful boy, how not to love and miss him. But no, not once, not a single word. So she hasn't been around since. She has, of course she has. You can't go far without money, and that man doesn't need her without money. My sister-in-law came back 2 weeks later. Harry hadn't even gotten back from his business trip yet. Adam and I are walking from the store with a heavy grocery bag in one hand and my grandson in the other, and near the entrance, Mother of God. My daughter-in-law is sitting there. Adam shouted, Mom, Mom, but she and cry and hug my son. She almost falls on her knees in front of me again. There are a lot of unkind eyes around. Everyone is curious about what's going on in the neighborhood. But I picked up the bride and took her home. What to be ashamed in front of people? And she, poor thing, continues to wail about her misfortune. "What shall I do, Mother?" she says. "How can I go on? She won't forgive me, Harry, and neither will you." And Adam, he cuddled up to his mother, hugging her, saying his own things to her. And I felt sorry for the poor head. He grew up without a mother. Who would teach him life? A mother to a child, whatever she is. Don't make another orphan out of Adam. Let them raise their own child if they've given birth. How could she? Claire was indignant to abandon such a lovely boy. And that's my sweetheart. She must have been a breed. She'd live like a human being, and then she'd do something nasty. So we agreed that we wouldn't say anything to Harry, and we'd start our lives all over again, as if she'd never done anything wrong. It's not uncommon for young people to have disagreements and quarrels between husband and wife. But as they embrace and sleep in the same bed for a night, all the past will be forgotten and there will be peace and tranquility in the house again. Didn't it work out that way for them? Claire asked. I don't know. Harry was making good money. I tried to help everyone. Kelly, that's my daughter-in-law, tried not to spend too much money, so they decided to separate. At least a little, but to have their own place. They moved from me to a one-room apartment, and to pay for it took, as it is called now, a big loan for housing exactly. A mortgage? That's what Claire said. That's the one. Margaret rejoiced, a forgotten word. They live on their own. And what about me? My eyes can't see, my ears can't hear what's going on between them. Whether we lovebirds live amicably, but only in peace, I have not known since then. I wondered if Kelly would bear it, if she'd keep her temper, or if she'd go back to her old ways. She didn't hold back, so she went out again. Claire said yes to Paula. She has. Maybe she inherited it from her parents, but she had a nature that couldn't be overcome. Was my son worth it, to change him for swindlers? He doesn't drink, he can't stand it. Well, he smokes. It's a hard job. He's used to it. He's never tried tobacco before. He's not a bad character. He doesn't pick on little things. He does everything for the house, everything with a smile. Kelly sleeps in the morning and won't go to the baby. I boil sometimes. It's not a good thing for a grown woman to lie in bed until noon, until the sun starts to blaze up her ass, but Harry just smiles. Let her sleep, Mama. She never slept so sweet as she did at your place. How did she do it in her apartment? Claire wondered. I suppose she did. I've only been there a couple of times, and then I've come with my own hotels. She said, "Oh, Mama, how delicious, what pies you bake." She praises them, but she puts store-bought sausage and cheese on the table. I found out later that she started treating Harry badly, too. She'd disappear for a night or two, and he wouldn't say a word, wouldn't bother me. That's when I wished I'd warned him. Watch your wife. She's not averse to running off to the left. And then Kelly, our dear Kelly, she started drinking. One day she went to the store and did not return, but now she left with money, all that was at home, earned by her husband, took with her. She will come back, come to her senses and come back. How can she leave her son? Margaret comforted Claire. No, honey, she's not coming back. She's dead. She had an accident. Claire, who had not expected such an outcome, covered her mouth with her hand in fright. Margaret continued her sad story. She was traveling with a man, and they died together, whether it was her half-lover or another unknown. I don't know the details. Harry told me all about it. She sold their apartment together, too, as it turned out. How could she do that? It's a complicated process. Everyone who lives in the apartment has to participate in it. Claire was once again surprised. And they also have a minor child, His share is not allowed to be sold in any case. The guardianship authorities monitor it because he is defenseless, Adam, and should not remain without registration and without housing. Claire was aware of a lot of the legal laws by nature of her job, so she sold it to some crooks. There's all these black whatchamacallits nowadays. Black realtors? That's what Claire said. Yeah, that's what her half-lover set her up with, and got Kelly to do the paperwork. They got a law against the law. They'll get around anything. They say they even kill people for housing if they get a lonely person who nobody asks if they're alive. And then what? Claire was already looking forward to the denouement. Then she ran away, collected all the coins and ran. The money's been squandered. So Harry came to me with Adam, asked me to look after him. He said I had a contract to finish my work. I let him go. I'm looking after my grandson myself, but it's getting harder and harder every day. While the women were talking in the kitchen, Adam fell asleep. Claire helped her carry the boy to his crib, and then she and Margaret cleared the table. She washed the dishes, and as she fell asleep, she was surprised to think that she hadn't thought of her husband at all for hours. In the morning after breakfast, she thanked the old woman for everything. Margaret, you saved me. I had no one to turn to talk to, and here you are. God brought me to you. Come on, my dear, the old woman said. If it wasn't for me, who else would have found someone else? A man in the world will not be lost. You just don't sit alone. Close yourself. Come out of your resentment. She kissed Adam on his fair head and hugged his grandmother and went home. Promised to come back soon. She really did want to get back to those two as soon as possible, to help as much as she could with them. She didn't want to go home, but there was nowhere to go. She had to solve an unexpected and despicable situation, which was created by the husband she loved before. The husband turned out not to be full of peers at all, as it would have been good if he had spared the woman from finding out about the relationship. Remembering that the best defense is offense, Jordan from the first minute took the form of insulted virtue. He met his wife with indignant words. "Where have you been, Claire?" Saying God knows what to me on the phone, throwing me off my rhythm. "You're sleeping at God knows whose house." Oh, Claire grinned, no longer surprised by Jordan's insolence. "You're out of rhythm, aren't you? And I thought you had already learned to sit on two chairs, to maneuver between two families? Well, I haven't succeeded yet." She saw that Jordan had lost a little of the high ground from which he had intended to speak to her. He shrank back and lowered his head. "Claire," he spoke in a different way, "you have to understand, there's a child in there." I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't going to have an affair on the side, but I couldn't take it. Claire looked at him straight on. "You couldn't stand the lonely idleness while I was courting your father, could you? You wanted a young body, a free relationship. Well, good for you. You're doing great. It's not like that. You're overplaying your hand. I resented you. I'm a man. I need to feel supported and cared for. And I'm a woman, so I don't need anything at all, do I?" Claire was beginning to boil. "You haven't spent a single night with my father. Not once have you offered to help me with the nurse. And I'm a young woman, too. Men still look at me, by the way, even though I've dried up and aged over the years." Jordan had nothing to say, and she was getting more and more atomized. "Do you realize what it means to spend years after a sick old man? How many times I got up to my father every night. How hard it was for me to lift him, to wash him. How I withered without society, without girlfriends. I have none left." Claire cried. They both could not remember how they had been as young people, loving each other and full of life plans. Jordan felt a grudging estrangement from his wife, forgetting everything she had sacrificed so that he could pursue his career in peace. Claire was thrown into shock by Jordan's betrayal. She simply couldn't imagine how he could have gotten to such a point of hypocrisy, though she could now recall many episodes she hadn't paid attention to. Some suspicious or inappropriate words of his, letting them pass her ears. "You're selfish." Blamed her own self after all, Jordan. "You've always been preoccupied only with yourself, with your own needs. Your long lists, your demands, the grocery lists I fed your father, demanding a nurse or a doctor to visit Christopher at home." Claire was no longer able to be indignant. She looked at her husband's flushed, aroused face and couldn't understand how her beloved Jordan could hide in the body, this fat, lustful male, thinking only of himself. What had to happen for a man to change so much? After all, Jordan's mother and father were deeply decent people. A lot of things made sense now. They had lived apart for a long time. Except for Christopher, they had nothing left to bind them together. You wouldn't think of a shared living space as a bond, but as the fruit of a marriage. Yes, and this apartment, for 10 years, became not cozy, abandoned, although they tried to bring it to a more decent form. With the salary that Jordan received, they could have long ago bought a more spacious home to equip it according to the latest fashion, hire a designer and excellent craftsman, but she had no strength, and he had no desire to somehow strengthen the household, and thus the family. And now she is alone at a broken trough. This does not scare her at all. The protective power of the body does not give Claire despair and think about the future. She needs to urgently cut this knot of feelings that has been tormenting her for more than 24 hours, because it is unbearable. Enough. Powerfully, she interrupted Jordan, who was already carrying something completely obscene, purposely atomizing himself. She only heard the words about her infertility, but she didn't care anymore. "Pack your things and leave. You have your own apartment now. You have a wife and a son. Go. I can't promise to die, but you'll finally be Adriana forever. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." "I will," answered the confused Jordan. He did not expect such a quick resolution of the case. Taking the big bag, he slammed the door. Claire only grinned again, noting, "Prepared, packed the bag in advance." 2 months passed, and Claire became a frequent visitor to Margaret and Adam. She did all the housework, looked after the boy and his grandmother, and became very attached to them. She didn't want to stay in her own apartment. First of all, she had gotten used to it over the years. Secondly, she felt stuffy there. Memories came into her head, plunging her again and again into a maelstrom of bad moods and depression. She would only leave for her place in the evening, but in the morning she would deal with the divorce proceedings, grab a bite to eat somewhere on the beach, and wander around the city until she was exhausted. The weather, for Claire, was now good for anything. She treasured every hour of freedom and the opportunity to enjoy nature and the cityscape. One evening, when Claire was about to go to bed, the phone rang. It was Margaret. The old woman's voice sounded muffled and painful. "Claire, I'm not feeling well. I've called an ambulance. Come to Adam, for God's sake. He'll be alone if they take me away." Claire called a cab and rushed to the boy, taking some of the groceries she had at home. Half an hour later, she was already there. She saw an ambulance at a familiar entrance. Worried, she ran up to the second floor. The doctor had just examined the patient and was washing his hands. "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" Claire asked. "You see, it needs a full examination." The doctor answered evasively. "Her condition is moderately serious. She needs rest. We will take her to the hospital, and the main treatment will be prescribed after the final diagnosis." From that day on, Claire's worries increased. Now she visited the old woman in the hospital, brought her home-cooked food, and comforted her, promising that everything would be all right. Adam never let go of Claire's hand, and Margaret thanked God that she had someone to leave her beloved grandson to. One evening, Claire was putting Adam to bed. She read him a book, laid him on his side, covered him with a blanket, and began to hum a little song. Suddenly he looked over her head and jumped out of bed screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Claire turned and stood in the doorway with a surprised face. A tall, handsome man froze and looked at her without understanding anything. Then he picked up his son in his arms, kissed him, and asked, "Adam, who is this?" The boy took his father's face in his palms, looked into his eyes, and with complete seriousness whispered, "This is my mother, only it's a secret." The little boy didn't want to let go of his father. "Adam, but Daddy drove a long time, then flew on an airplane. He is very tired and hungry." Claire explained, "All right, feed him." Reluctantly, he let go of his father's hand. "Dad, will you come to sleep at my place?" "Of course, son," the father promised fervently. As always, that's why he was coming. Claire put the boy to bed again and closed the door and went into the kitchen. Quickly warming up the food, she set the table and sat down across from Harry. "I'll feed you for real in the morning, but for now there's nothing else to eat. I'm sure it's a nice dinner after a working canteen." Harry smiled and began to chow down on the soup. Over tea, Claire couldn't help herself. "I know a lot about you, Harry. Your mother told me." The man looked seriously into her eyes. "Well, that's good. I hope to get to know you better, too." 2 years had passed since Harry had discovered Claire in his house. They were married and quite happy. A few months ago, they had moved into the house Harry had bought, a large, spacious house with plenty of room for everyone. Margaret couldn't get enough of her daughter-in-law and kept telling her son that she had found him such a good wife. Adam had long ago called Claire Mama, and she was genuinely happy about it, gifting the boy with unspent maternal love. She was picking out an ice cream cone near the summer kiosk when a man's voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw Jordan. She recognized her ex-husband immediately, but was struck by the change in his appearance. Jordan had grown old and flabby. His stomach hung over the strap of his pants, and he looked untidy and unkempt. "Hello, Claire." Jordan came very close to her and wanted to reach out his hand or hug her, but when he ran into his ex-wife's gaze, he got embarrassed and lowered his hands. "Hello." Claire answered not so much coldly as indifferently. She was deeply indifferent to this strange man, and the meeting did not please her at all. "How are you?" Jordan asked, looking the woman over from head to toe. It was the same old Claire, young, slender, and beautiful. Only better then? Probably over the years, she had gained self-confidence, the kind of confidence that only loving and beloved women have. Jordan did not know how to analyze, but he felt this confidence at once, and with a cold heart, he reached out to his ex-wife. "Good, and you, I see, not too much?" Claire inquired, unable to hide her dislike. "Yes, I'm divorced." Jordan waved his hands in different directions, as if confessing his helplessness. Though Claire didn't ask him any questions, he began to tell her in a hurry. "Adriana, she lied to me. It turned out she didn't have a child with me. I spent 5 years raising someone else's boy. Do you understand, Claire?" He looked at Claire again, as if complaining of injustice and asking for protection. "Well, what can we do? It's not the child's fault," Claire said, and then she made up with her ex and went to him. Just left a note on the table. Some people don't leave notes. Claire grinned bitterly, remembering her past experiences. However, now everything was almost forgotten, and she didn't want to remember, not to have anything to do with her ex-husband, not even to stand next to him. It was unpleasant for her. She looked away impatiently, waiting for Jordan to make way for her. "Claire, I'm so sorry to you. You know, I miss you so much. Why don't we try to start over? You love me, and I love you. You're too late, Jordan. With your love, I don't need it now." Claire turned away to make herself comfortable, to grab the ice cream bag and walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Claire, I'm alone, all alone. I won't make the same mistake I made last time, and you're alone too, so why don't we get together? You're childless. Who needs you but me?" "No, I'm not childless." Claire grinned contemptuously. "But that's none of your business." With her head held high, she strode past Jordan while he continued to stare after her. The man saw a tall, handsome man approach the woman. He held the hand of a blonde-haired boy, about 5 years old, and on his neck sat a little girl with dark curls on her head, diligently eating cotton candy. The happy family went on their way. Jordan stood and looked after them for a long time, thinking that he himself had given his happiness to this stranger.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana sat at home waiting for her mother and father to come home from work. They worked at the poultry farm as laborers. Adriana had already heated her parents' dinner and looked out of her relative's window. Soon the 17-year-old girl saw her mother, followed by her father. Adriana smiled and ran to open the front door. As soon as her parents walked in, Adriana said she wanted to talk to them over dinner. The head of the family looked at her daughter with a stern look and asked, "I hope the conversation is not about your pregnancy." "Daddy, again you have failed to make a joke." A little irritated, said the daughter, who already knew her father's gaze and always distinguished when the gaze is angry. And when deliberately angry in such a situation, the man was not angry. The head of the family on the daughter's answer laughed and said, "You know me and my mother is peeled. Okay, let's set the table and talk over dinner." Soon the family was sitting in the kitchen and talking peacefully. When dinner was about to end, the girl's father asked his daughter what exactly she wanted to say. Adriana hesitated a bit and said that she had changed her mind about going to medical school and wanted to become an interior designer. When the father heard this, he was amazed, because his daughter had been dreaming about medicine since she was 16 years old. And then, when it is already necessary to go to enroll, she changes her mind. And he asked, "Why you choose this particular direction in our village in this specialty? You obviously do not get a job." "I know that, but maybe I'll be lucky enough to make my personal life in the city. And to be honest, I don't really want to go back to the village where there's no future. You're the one who started dreaming about a prince on a white horse, but you are not yet 18 to think about it," said the girl's mother. "Mom, Dad, but I'll be 18 on September 1st. And I'm not saying that I'm going to the city to arrange my personal life right now. Right now, I want to major in design." Parents. The girls looked at each other, and the head of the family did not object to his daughter's choice. He told his wife that Adriana has the right to decide what she wants to be in the future. Adriana's mother looked at her child, then hugged her and asked her to keep her head in the city. The girl gratefully hugged each parent in turn. Soon, Adriana left for the city where she enrolled in college to study design. The girl was given a dormitory as a non-resident. She immediately made friends with her roommate, and soon Adriana began her studies. In college, Adriana especially became friends with fellow student Betty, who lived in this city with her parents. Adriana liked this girl with her carefree character. Time moved imperceptibly, and now the winter vacation was approaching. A week before Adriana's departure to the village, Betty suggested to her to go and sit in a cafe. Adriana supported her friend's idea, as she didn't often visit such places due to lack of money. Her parents sent her some money, but they quickly ran out. Soon the students were sitting in a cafe and discussing how they would celebrate the new year. Betty said that she would go to a nightclub where she would have a good time. Adriana said sadly that she did not have such an opportunity because they had not yet built such entertainment places in the village. Betty looked at her in amazement and then asked, "How do you have fun there? Young people usually go to the club on weekends for discos." "Well, it sucks. I don't envy the villagers," Betty said with a laugh. The girls continued to talk to each other as two young men approached them and offered them company. Betty looked at the boys. Then she looked at Adriana as if to ask if she would be willing to be introduced. Adriana nodded and let her friend know she was okay with it. And in just a few minutes, the guys had already joined the girls. One of the young men was called Konstantin and the other Stephen. Adriana immediately took notice of Stephen and the whole evening was sneaking glances at him. Adriana also noticed that her friend liked this guy. Some more time passed, and Adriana told the company that it was time for her to go to the dormitory. The young men sighed disappointedly, and Konstantin said that he and his friend had hoped to go for a longer walk. Adriana responded by suggesting that they should meet tomorrow and just walk outside. Stephen, having heard the suggestion, took up the idea, and then he drove Adriana to the dormitory and then Betty home in his car. Adriana was already lying down to rest, thinking about her new acquaintance, when she received a call on her cell phone from a friend. Betty excitedly described how she had a long conversation with Stephen when saying goodbye. Adriana unknowingly felt jealous of the boyfriend, and suddenly she said, "Classmates, why are you telling me this now? I want to bring it to your attention that I like Stephen, and I saw you looking at him in the cafe. So I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to his friend. Don't tell me what to do. And you're right to point out that I was looking at him because I liked him too. Now I will bring it to your attention that Stephen is an adult, and it's up to him to decide who he wants to spend his time with," Adriana said sharply, and immediately disconnected the connection. The next day, the girls met at the college. They felt that a cat had run between them and did not communicate especially strongly. And in the evening of the same day, when the girls met with their boyfriends, the young men noticed that the girls tried not to communicate with each other. Stephen at first tried to defuse the situation, and then asked what fly had bitten you both. "Yesterday was so much fun, and today it's like a day of mourning. Why don't we break into pairs? I want to go out with Adriana." And after the last sentence, he turned to Adriana and asked, "Do you mind?" "Of course not." With a smile, the girl answered and looked triumphantly at her friend, who smirked wryly and said quietly, "But it's on. Go for a walk." Adriana got into the car to Stephen, and they went for a drive around the evening city. In the car, the young man asked the girl to tell about herself. She complied with his request, and then the man asked what had happened between the girls. Adriana, "Shit," she said to herself as she did not know what to answer. In the meantime, Stephen looked questioningly at Daddy, said a little fight they had. Asking what for? Since I won't tell you anyway. Okay, I won't ask. And anyway, you found out all about me. Why I don't know your background yet. The young man laughed and said that he kept more about himself on purpose, so that there was a reason to meet again. The young woman liked his answer, but insisted that he tell her about himself. From the narrative, Stephen Adriana learned that he is 27 years old, works in a bank. He lives with his mother, but is going to buy a 2-room apartment within a month. About his father, the guy said that his father died last year, and also the young man said that he was married. The marriage lasted only a year. The girl, having heard that Stephen was divorced, asked why he separated from his wife. The interlocutor, after a little thought, replied, "There is a reason that is most often used by people who want to divorce. It is called so. They did not match their characters. I hope that your curiosity satisfied." After a while, the girl said she had to go to the hostel. The man drove Adriana home, and when she was about to get out of the car, he pulled her to him and wanted to kiss her. Adriana pushed the new acquaintance away from her and asked indignantly what he was doing. Stephen looked at the girl perplexed and simply replied that he wanted to kiss the now Adriana. She looked at the young man in amazement and mumbled, "Is it customary for you to kiss a girl on the lips on the second day of acquaintance? What's wrong with that? But we hardly know each other to kiss already," she said quietly. "If you don't want to, I won't. Okay, let's say goodbye. I gotta go too. We'll see each other again, of course, but only after a while, because I have to go on a business trip. I'm going to my parents' house in a few days too. You will call me for sure." Soon, Adriana went to her parents' house in the countryside. She stayed there for the winter vacation. During this time, the guy called her on New Year's Eve, and one more time. The girl was worried that her relationship with Stephen might not work out. She had already realized that she had fallen in love with this man with all her heart. Soon Adriana arrived for her studies. At college, she met up with a friend she hadn't spoken to since Stephen had suggested a walk through the pears. Adriana thought that their conflict with her friend had already passed during the winter break. So without a second thought, she approached Betty and asked how the girl had celebrated New Year's Eve. Betty arrogantly glanced at her classmate and said, "Why are you wondering? My time about driving. Although I can tell you that I've had a good time these days. I went out with Stephen a couple times. He should be here tomorrow. By the way, what do you mean you met him?" Adriana asked in bewilderment. "You've gone to the country. So he suggested that we spend some leisure time together, and I didn't refuse." Adriana walked away from Betty in silence. She felt a wave of hatred rising in her soul towards her friend, but not towards the young man. Adriana blamed Betty for everything. She believed that it was her classmate who initiated these meetings. After studying, Adriana hurried to the dormitory. She couldn't wait to call her lover, and as soon as she found herself in the room, she immediately dialed Stephen. And when she heard his voice, she asked when he was coming. The guy was surprised at the girl's call and answered that in 2 days, and Adriana asked the question that worried her the most. "Tell me, why did you go out with me? You like Betty, don't you? You're strange, but I liked you. That's why we went out. Let me come over and we'll talk about it." Soon Stephen arrived in town and he met the girl. He looked at Adriana, who had her head down, looking at her hand. The man asked the girl why she had called earlier with this topic of conversation. Adriana kept silent as she did not want to admit to the guy that she was in love with him. And when Stephen pulled the girl to himself and kissed her passionately on the lips, she did not pull away, because at that moment she realized that if she pushed the men away now, Stephen would just leave and never come back. The guy kissed Adriana for a long time, and then the couple went for a drive around the city. After this meeting, a month passed. During this time, Stephen had already bought an apartment and occasionally met Adriana. The girl was angry that the guy came to her so rarely, and he told her in response that he had an emergency at work and had to stay at the bank a lot. Adriana practically did not communicate with her friend. Betty was calm about it and only occasionally made tricky jokes. That Adriana only needed Stephen for a while. Adriana tried not to react to her former friend's words. But one day, when she again heard a rejoinder in her address from Betty, she could not stand it and replied, "You are all angry that the word did not choose you, but that's not my fault. He made his own choice. Why don't you stop bugging me with your sarcastic remarks? You're silly. Pretty soon you'll be crying that you crossed me. Are you saying you'll still claim my boyfriend knowing I'm dating him? You got that right. And if I have to, I'm not going to play hard to get and jump into bed with him," Betty said with a smirk, and immediately went on her way. Adriana stood in a stupor. From this conversation, the girl suddenly realized that Stephen was talking to Betty, since how could the former friend know that she was denying Stephen intimacy? And at the same moment, Adriana decided that she would call her boyfriend right away and offer him to spend the night together. The girl, not thinking long, dialed the guy and said that she wanted to spend the weekend with a sleepover at his place. The man was stunned by this news and instantly agreed. Soon Adriana was making love to Stephen for the first time, and for the morning. When she woke up, she did not regret her decision. She wanted now every morning to wake up in the arms of her favorite man and hear from him pleasant compliments. After that night, the man came to the girl's dormitory more often and took her to his place for sleepovers. Adriana already thought that soon they would become husband and wife, and so she told her lover, "We have been dating for almost 3 months. Maybe we should think about getting married. I don't really need a stamp in my passport. We're good together, and that's what matters. You know, I have a question for you too. Tell me, what are you ready to do for love for me?" The young woman thought for a moment, and then in all seriousness answered that she was ready to sacrifice everything, but only to be near him. In response to this confession, the guy smiled and said that nothing had to be sacrificed, and immediately hugging the girl said, "I just want you to make a tattoo on your shoulder, descending roses. It really turns me on in bed, but it's up to you to decide if you want to do it or not. And if you agree to it, I'll draw the sketch of the flower myself. I'll do it. In the meantime, you draw the flower." The next day, the girl found out how much the procedure cost, and after that she called her mother to ask her for money. Adriana did not hide from her mother what she was asking for, and honestly said that she wanted to get a tattoo. Her mother responded by saying that it was stupid to disfigure her body with Adriana's pictures. When she heard the refusal, she continued to me, "It is very important to do it the way a loved one asked for it. You got a boyfriend, and you never even mentioned him once on the phone. How did you start living in the city? Did you become secretive? I'm sorry, but I wasn't ready to tell you about my relationship with this man. Now I'm sure of our feelings for each other. I'll tell you all about Stephen. But now you tell me, will you give me the money or not?" The mother said yes to her daughter, and on the same day, Adriana received a transfer from her parents. After a while, the girl visited a salon and made a tattoo on her right shoulder. She proudly showed the picture on her body to her lover. Stephen enthusiastically appreciated the tattoo and told the girl the cherished words that Adriana was dear to him. A month flew by when Adriana, having got up in the morning, felt indisposed. The girl felt nauseous and had a general feeling of weakness. Adriana barely sat through her classes that day, hurrying to the dormitory to lie down. She hoped that she would feel better the next day. However, it didn't happen. Adriana felt an uneasy feeling in her soul, and then it hit her. What if she was pregnant? After her college class, Adriana stopped by the drugstore and bought a test. When she got to her dorm, she went straight to the restroom where she did the procedure as instructed. And then the girl watched with excitement as 2 blue stripes appeared on the litmus paper. Adriana was unspeakably happy about it. After all, now she was carrying a baby from her favorite person under her heart. And this meant that soon Adriana will become the legal spouse of the chosen one. The young woman immediately called her lover and said that she wanted to see him immediately. The man promised the girl that as soon as he was free, he would come. Adriana waited with excitement for the chosen one to tell the glad tidings, and as soon as she saw Stephen, immediately hugged him and in his ear whispered the news about the baby. The man pulled away from the embrace and looked at the girl unhappily. Then he asked what Adriana was going to do about it. The young woman looked at the boy perplexed and said firmly that she was going to give birth. Stephen was a little down after the words of the girl, which did not escape Adriana's attention, and she asked him a question. "Are you not happy about it?" "I don't know how to answer that. It's just that the news was unexpected, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Since you decided to have a baby, we probably need to legalize the relationship so that the baby is born in a complete family, where there is a mom and dad. These are exactly the words I've been waiting to hear from you when you need to introduce me to your mom. And then I'm gonna call my parents and invite them over, and they're gonna rent an apartment here for a couple days. You and I need to get married as soon as possible, before I get a belly." Soon Stephen introduced Adriana to his mother Kathy. Adriana tried to be friendly with her future relative, but she intuitively sensed that the woman didn't like her. Adriana thought to herself that Adriana's mother was probably just not ready for her son to remarry and was therefore a little belligerent toward her. Meanwhile, Kathy began to ask the young couple when they were going to get married. Stephen replied that initially they would wait for Adriana's parents and then they would apply at once. The landlady nodded in response and immediately said, "Son, I won't discourage you from taking this step, but I think you're rushing the wedding. You don't know each other well enough to be a family. But if you've made this decision, I insist that there be no wedding. I just want you to get married without the formal part. Your father and I already spent a lot of money on your first wedding. I wasn't planning on having a big party. I was just going to get married and sit with my relatives in a cafe. And we're in a hurry to apply to the registry office for one reason only. Adriana is expecting a baby. You have a rare young person, as I see," Stephen's mother said coldly and looked at her future daughter-in-law with a piercing look. As soon as Adriana and her chosen one went outside from Kathy, the young woman told the man with annoyance that she would like to have a wedding, not a party. The young woman added that she was getting married for the first time and would like to be in a white dress on that day. Stephen replied that it was only a waste of finances to play a wedding now. The young woman tried to object to the young man, but he interrupted her and said, "You know very well that I have recently purchased real estate. I had savings, but not enough to buy an apartment, so I had to take out a loan from the bank. Now you think about it. How much money are we going to use for the party? Or maybe your parents will give us money to throw a wedding. No, they can't help us because they don't make much money. Then we'll never speak of it again." Soon Adriana called her parents and invited them to come to meet her fiancé. Only the girl's mother came. The woman blessed her daughter and promised that she and her father would already come to the marriage ceremony. Adriana was happy that now her mother is familiar with her favorite person. After a while, the young people filed an application in the registry office. Then the newlyweds celebrated the marriage ceremony in one cozy cafe, where only the closest relatives were present. After Adriana became the legal spouse of Stephen, then she moved to live in her husband's apartment. Time slowly went on. The first half of the pregnancy, the young woman felt good. But when the second trimester began, then the doctor said that she needed to lie in the hospital for preservation. And as a result, Adriana was often in the hospital almost until the birth. The young woman gave birth prematurely, a baby girl, which she and her husband named Christina. While in the hospital, Adriana learned that her daughter had kidney disease. The young woman was very worried about this and asked Our Lady only for the health of her little girl. In connection with the girl's illness, Adriana stayed in the hospital for a long time, and after discharge, the attending doctor immediately said that now it was necessary to carefully monitor her daughter's condition and to act precisely according to the instructions of the medical staff. The young woman, as soon as she found herself at home, realized that she was not ready to cope with maternal duties alone. Adriana approached her husband and asked him to talk to her mom about staying with them for a while. Stephen, after listening to the request, responded by telling Adriana to call on her own. She was offended by her husband's words and told him, "You must be forgetting that Christina is your daughter. You see that the baby cries a lot. And I, because I became a mom for the first time, do not know how to act in this or that situation. You yourself wanted this baby, so you should be ready for all the surprises. There are internet forums and literature. Here, sit and learn how to babysit a baby. And after all, you have your own mother to turn to. But my mom works, and your mom is retired. Okay, I'll talk to my mother-in-law myself." Hiding irritation, said the girl. And in a few minutes, Adriana dialed Kathy's number. As soon as she picked up the phone, the daughter-in-law asked her to come to visit. The pensioner asked what was the purpose. Adriana almost responded by cursing her mother-in-law, but then she pulled herself together and politely said, "Just to check on your granddaughter. And in fact, I would like with you in confidence you can come tomorrow." "I will try," said the interlocutor, and immediately disconnected the connection. Adriana waited all the next day, but her mother-in-law didn't show up. Kathy came only 2 days later. She entered the apartment and glanced at her granddaughter and asked her what her daughter-in-law wanted from her. Adriana did not go around. Yes, she told her that she needed help. She explained that she could not cope with the duck, as the child only in her arms behaves calmly, and she has to do laundry, ironing, and cooking at home. Adriana asked her mother-in-law to come to them at least 3 times a week for 3 hours. Kathy didn't say a word. She listened and then said thoughtfully that she never thought her son would marry a country bumpkin who couldn't be a mother and a good housewife. Adriana felt anger boiling up inside her after her mother-in-law's words, but mentally she forced herself to calm down and said aloud, "I realize you don't like me, but your son made a choice and fell in love with me. And we live together. Soulmate. And I brought you here to ask for help, not to discuss me. Stephen and I are raising your granddaughter. You know, your granddaughter, not some stranger's girl. And that's the only reason I'm asking for your help. I don't need to make any pretty speeches right now. I'm a mother too, and I raised my son without any help from my family. I think you are just lazy as you don't have time to do everything when the baby is sleeping. Your son was not born sick like Stephen and I were, and you didn't have to give medications on a strict schedule. That's one thing. And secondly, our daughter sleeps restlessly if she lies in the crib any rustle, and the baby wakes up. And Christina sleeps serenely only when she is in my arms. And so I just do not have enough time for household chores, as I am always with my daughter in my arms. You don't have to beg me with tears. I can come over twice a week for a couple hours. Now I have to go." Adriana saw her mother-in-law off and breathed a sigh of relief. She was even glad that the old woman would come twice a week, and as soon as her husband arrived, Adriana informed him that she had spoken to his mother, and they had agreed. Stephen nodded in agreement. It had been a month since Kathy had visited Adriana. And then the elderly woman told her sister-in-law that she was leaving for the sanatorium, so she would not come the day after tomorrow. Adriana looked at her mother-in-law in astonishment and was surprised, as there had been no talk about the sanatorium before. Adriana decided not to focus on it and tried to distract herself from these thoughts. A few days passed, and Adriana went out for a walk with her daughter. She wanted a stroller and quietly rode her daughter. As suddenly Stop Digging, the young woman saw her mother-in-law, who was getting out of her car. Kathy did not see her daughter-in-law. She was in a hurry to go to a fashion boutique. Meanwhile, Adriana could not get away from the fact that she had just seen a relative who was supposed to be in a sanatorium. Adriana came home after the walk in a bad mood. She wanted to tell her husband that her mother was a two-faced person, but she could not say anything because her daughter suddenly began to cry. And when Adriana touched the baby's forehead, she realized that the child had a fever. The woman called an ambulance, and she and Christina were hospitalized. As it turned out, subsequently the girl's kidneys made themselves known. Adriana spent a long time with her daughter in the hospital. After discharge, expensive medications were required. The man was angry that so much money was spent on pills and injections. Adriana saw that all this unnerved her loved one and calmed him as much as she could, saying that Christina would soon get better. However, 6 months later, the girl became ill again, and once again Adriana and her daughter went to the hospital. Stephen this time very rarely visited his wife and child. He told his wife that he had a lot of work at the bank. Adriana only sighed bitterly in response. After a while, the young woman and her daughter were discharged. The doctor immediately informed Adriana that surgery would likely be required if a recurrence occurred. Adriana replied that if it had to be done, she and her husband were ready. Time moved on, and Christina had already turned 1.5 years old, and the young woman already thought that the girl's disease had receded forever. But her expectations were not justified, as her daughter became ill again. And here is another hospitalization. This time Adriana already knew that there would be an operation, and was ready for it. Soon the girl was operated. The doctor immediately informed the mother that now it will be necessary to go through a long rehabilitation period. The medic, after the discharge of the child, gave the woman a full list of instructions, how the daughter should be cared for. Adriana with Christina returned home. The girl was glad that now the hospital walls are behind her. She really hoped that her daughter would recover completely. And when she and Christina were taken from the hospital by her husband, she said so. Stephen only gave her husband a sullen look after these words. Life went on from there. Adriana tried to be a model wife and always welcomed her husband home from work. However, Adriana began to notice that lately her husband was often late at the bank, and it was also suspicious that Stephen, who was not a fan of nightclubs, suddenly became a regular. The woman tried to talk to her husband on the subject, but he replied, as soon as the conversation on the subject came up, that this way he relieves stress. After work, and lately Adriana has noticed another oddity in the behavior of her spouse. When her husband gets a phone call, he often goes out to talk on the stairwell. Woman, it seems suspicious. And when once again Stephen called and he went out, she quietly followed her chosen one. Adriana looked through the peephole and saw that her lover was standing with his back to her and talking to someone. Adriana opened the door a little and listened. Immediately, she heard her husband saying, "Shalva is not mine. I miss you too." As soon as Adriana heard this phrase, she was like an electric shock. She jerked the door open and looked angrily at her spouse. The man turned around and immediately assessed the situation. Stephen asked his spouse to come into the apartment and not to make a fight here. Adriana forced herself to do it, and as soon as her husband followed her into the hallway, she turned to him and wanted to slap him. But Stephen managed to intercept her hand, saying, "You're behaving like a countrywoman. Didn't you realize earlier that I had a woman on the side? We're civilized people and have a right to privacy. Are you saying that I can have a lover and go to him and have a good night out? You can't, as you're the one who has to keep the family home safe. And I, for your information, am the only one who brings money into our budget. And you're giving me a hard time about it. As soon as Christina turns 3, I'm going to go to work. It's only a couple months away. Don't talk nonsense. Where are you going to work if you haven't finished college? How about selling vegetables at the market? I won't let that happen. I don't need someone pointing a finger at me and telling me that a respectable banker's wife is a slave trader. I don't understand you, but you accused me of cheating. What's the big deal? I was expecting you to have the city permit. I support you and your daughter. I don't have to take your pathetic allowance into account because it's only enough for your medication. I don't beat you like other husbands do and keep you up all night. What else do you want? But you have a mistress. And for your information, I don't want to share you with any woman. If you don't hear me now, I will." With tears shouted the young woman and rushed to the kitchen, and after a few minutes returned back, presenting a knife to her wrist. Adriana did not say anything at that moment, but only looked at her husband, who realized from the look on his wife's face that she would do what she had planned. Stephen smiled gently at his wife and asked her to put down the cold weapon. And then the head of the family said that at this time they had overreacted. It is necessary to calm down and talk. The man, after these words, approached his wife and took the knife from her hands. Then he hugged her bare shoulder and gently kissed her where the tattoo was. The woman cried and snuggled into her husband's chest. Stephen stroked his wife's hair and asked her to stop shedding tears. Suddenly, the landlord lifted the face of the chosen one and said that he had an idea. Adriana, with tears in her eyes, she asked, "What do you want to propose?" "You should go to the village to your parents. You and Christina at least a little air and not be gassed by the air. It would do our daughter good. Especially you said yourself that soon we'll register for kindergarten, and she needs to gain strength before that. And where to do that? Not in the country. I'll think of something about your labor activity. Adriana listened to her husband's proposal in suspense and then exclaimed with indignation that Stephen had chosen her on purpose. She lived in the village so that she could have fun with other women. As if the man was ready for these words, so he hugged his wife again and gently in her ear said, "Do not talk nonsense. I'll even stay with you in the village for a few days. You and I are radically changing our lives for the better. I will not have any more trips to the side." "Did you mean it just now?" "Of course I mean it. Go ahead, call your mother and tell her you're coming soon. I'll take a few days off work tomorrow." Soon Adriana and her husband and daughter were in the village. Stephen stayed with his mother-in-law for 3 days and then returned to the city. When leaving, the man told his spouse that he would call every day. Adriana anxiously accompanied her beloved home. She was afraid that he would start seeing his mistress again. However, Stephen, as promised, called his wife every day and asked how she and her daughter spent their time. A month and a half had passed since Adriana had been living in the village with her daughter. The young woman missed her husband very much. And so, when he called and said that he was going home, Stephen did not particularly welcome his wife's decision, said that it would be possible to stay in the village longer. But Adriana refused and resolutely said, "If you do not come for us, in 2 days we will go ourselves with Christina." "No need, I will take you," replied the head of the family. 2 months had passed since Adriana had returned with her daughter from the village. During this time, they celebrated her birthday. Christina enrolled the girl in kindergarten. Stephen continued to work at the bank, and Adriana took care of household chores. Soon the young woman was bored with everyday life, and she turned to her husband. "You promised me a job. Isn't it time to do it? Is it bad for you to stay at home? I'm bored. I feel like a dependent." "Okay, I'll look into it one of these days." Adriana, after her husband's answer, hugged him and rejoiced in her heart. The woman piously believed that now there was a white streak in their family, and there would be no more sorrow. However, she was mistaken, because 2 weeks after this conversation, her daughter fell ill, and the girl was taken straight from kindergarten to the hospital. Christina's right kidney, Adriana, fell ill. After learning all the details from the doctor, she couldn't believe that her girl was back in the hospital bed. The woman questioned the doctor. How is this possible? After all, Christina had undergone surgery on this organ. The doctor answered the girl's mother using medical terms, and Adriana understood almost nothing from the words of the doctor. The woman was worried about her daughter's condition, and it was doubly hard for her when she visited Christina, and the girl asked not to leave her alone. Adriana tried to explain to the child that the doctor wanted to help her, but could do it only in the hospital. The daughter, though, listened to her mother's words, but still asked her mother to stay with her again. The young woman realized that it was simply impossible to explain to her 3-year-old daughter to stay in the hospital. And once again, when Adriana came to visit Christina, the girl whimpered and began to ask to go home. The young woman, as before, began to soothe the child. She herself could hardly hold back her tears. This dialogue was observed by the post nurse, who approached Adriana and said, "I understand you very well, how hard it is for you. I can only help in one way. When there will be my night shift, I will allow you to sleep with the girl in the room. I'll warn you that you'll have to sleep on a chair or a couch. But I'll do chairs in the hallway or even on the floor. How much do I owe you for this?" The nurse did not answer, but only smiled. Adriana immediately went to her daughter and told her that she would spend the night with her, but not every day. The little girl clapped her hands joyfully, and the mother at that moment thought how little a child needs for joy. Adriana. Now once every 4 days she slept over at her daughter's house. All other days the young woman was also at the hospital with Christina during the day. Adriana gave herself completely to caring for the girl. What was the use of a spouse who had taken a mistress? The woman found out about it by accident. It happened as follows. Adriana, as always, went to a sleepover with her daughter. But it turned out that the nurse was sick and was replaced by another nurse. Adriana tried to persuade the girl in the white coat to let her stay with Christina until morning. but the nurse replied that she had no right to do so and did not want to be reprimanded for making such a decision arbitrarily. Adriana had nothing left to do but to go home. The young woman quietly opened the door to the apartment and heard a woman's laughter. Adriana stopped like a halt. She listened and immediately recognized the guest's voice. It was her former college friend, who said it would be nice to be with you all the time and enjoy making love. "But that's what we do with you," in an excited voice, Stephen replied. Adriana didn't wait for Betty's reply and flashed into the living room where the couple was. Sitting on the couch in an embrace, Adriana threw herself at her rival, intending to claw at her hair. She was not allowed to do this. Spouse, who instantly oriented the man, hugged his beloved, and asked him to calm down. The young woman tried to break free, screaming that she was about to be torn to shreds by this mistress. Then Stephen commanded Betty, "Pack up and leave. We'll take care of this ourselves." The guest, smiling wryly, got up from the couch and sent a kiss to her former friend and went into the hallway. A few minutes later, the couple only heard the front door slam. Only after that, Stephen let go of his wife, who looked at him angrily. Adriana only wanted to shout hurtful phrases to her husband, but he beat her to it. "Pull yourself together. What did you want? You're always ending up in hospitals. You don't care about me. And I, too, need care and a woman's affection. That's what I found with Betty. So while I take care of my sick daughter and have fun, so like she's begging you for expensive medication, and you can afford champagne, which costs a lot of money. How am I supposed to understand you? I give all of myself only to you and my daughter, and you're saving me such a pig. I'm asking you, let's not use big words and mutual insults. It's just that I've already explained to you that I lacked female attention. Now I'll give you a woman's attention." In hysterics, said the young woman and rushed to the window, which opened wide. Adriana quickly climbed on the windowsill and fervently said, "If you lack attention, you will have it. I'm about to step off the 3rd floor and you'll be alone with your daughter. That's when you will have attention, because Christina will stay with you and you will have to take care of her. And if you fulfill your fatherly duties well, our daughter will provide you with care in your old age. Then you'll have a woman's attention in your old age. Think of your daughter. Why do you only care about yourself?" The man said, and made a step towards his wife. And at the same moment, he heard the exasperated voice of his wife. "Stay away. We need to clarify the relationship once and for all. You have to promise to stop going to women. You know very well that I can do this deed at this moment." The man saw that his wife was in a hysterical state, and Stephen decided that now was not the best occasion to clarify the relationship. So he constantly apologized to his beloved and got down on one knee in front of Adriana, quietly saying, "Come down. I only now realized how much we love each other, and also realized that how much grief I'd brought you in this life. I'm sorry." Adriana looked incredulously at her lover, who continued to speak beautiful words. The young woman distrustfully stretched out her hands to him, and the man hurriedly removed his wife from the windowsill. He promised that he would have no more liaisons with women on the side. Adriana, hearing Stephen give her his word, immediately cried out, "And you already promised me that. What happened in the end? I find you alone with Betty. I told you it wouldn't happen again. Let's talk about your daughter. Tell me how she's doing." As soon as they talked about the girl, Adriana forgot about what had happened here the other day. The young woman told her that she had not been able to stay with her daughter for the night, and immediately told her that there was good news. Adriana said that Christina would be discharged in 2 days. The man, after his wife's words, hugged her and noted that the latest news is joyful. Soon the girl was discharged. Adriana put her daughter back in daycare and reminded her husband about the conversation about work. A few days passed after Christina was discharged, and Adriana noticed that her spouse was now dropping calls when called, and after a while would lock himself in the bathroom with the phone. Adriana had a woman's intuition that her husband was doing this for a reason. He clearly continues to communicate with Betty even though he doesn't see her, as the chosen one was on time from work. Adriana realized that there was no point in talking to her husband about his communication with his ex-girlfriend, and the girl decided that it was worth talking to her mother-in-law about it. Adriana took her daughter to kindergarten in the morning and immediately went to Stephen's mother. Kathy met her daughter-in-law warily, as the daughter-in-law rarely showed up unannounced. The landlady invited her into the hall and asked what had brought Adriana to visit. The young woman did not go around and around, but said straight away, "Your son is cheating on me. I'd like you to influence Stephen. I've spoken to him several times, but our conversation is going nowhere. Stephen keeps looking at other women. I wonder about that in particular." With a chuckle, Kathy said, and immediately continued, "If my son is not satisfied, how can I influence him? I see only one way out. You need to divorce, and the whole problem will be solved." "What do you mean, divorce? Stephen and I have a child together. Besides, my daughter's not in good health. And on top of all that, I love my husband. Stephen is now in a relationship with an ex-girlfriend of mine. And believe me, she has no interest in your son. Betty is just trying to get back at me because Stephen chose me over her. All I'm asking you to do is talk to your son because his family is falling apart. I know Stephen listens to your word. Everything you've told me hasn't touched me in the slightest. But for my part, I promise I'll talk to my son. I think this is the end of our conversation, because I have to go to the tourist center. By the way, I wanted to tell you that you should go to the gym too, since you have some extra pounds that don't look good on you." Adriana did not reply to her mother-in-law's barbs. The young woman hurried to leave Kathy's apartment. Adriana thought that a conversation between mother and son would at least change the situation, and perhaps after a dialogue with her mother, her husband would stop communicating with Betty. In the meantime, Kathy, 2 days after the arrival of her daughter-in-law, called her son and asked him to come alone. Stephen complied with his mother's request, and in the evening, having warned his wife that he would be late, went to his mother. And now the man sits opposite his mother in the living room and looks at her questioningly. The elderly woman smiled at her son and asked how his family relations were. Stephen shrugged and mumbled that it wasn't bad. And at the same moment, Kathy sternly mumbled that she would like to know the true answer. And at once added the daughter-in-law, "The other day she complained to me that you were truanting. Tell me, why should I listen to this from the village Lockhorns? I don't know why she came to you. I'm not seeing anyone at the moment, and I'm tired of it all." "Of what exactly?" the landlady asked calmly. "I'm tired of the constant whims of my daughter. I realize that she is sick, but I cannot bear to hear often her crying. I'm sick and tired of my wife constantly controlling my every move. You know very well I like variety, and I've been known to go out on the side. But she knew that when she got married. Now she wants a model family man who admires only her. If things are so bad, why don't you just get a divorce? Make her choose. Either Adriana accepts you for who you are, or you work things out and live each on your own. It's so easy for you to talk about it. I've thought about it before and even said I was entitled to my own space. So she started scaring me about taking her own life." The man said irritably and rubbed his temples nervously with his palms. "It is possible that your spouse is manipulating you with such actions. They are simple threats to make you live by her rules. Women often use such tricks, but they don't really mean to take their own lives. Mom, did you see her when she grabbed the knife? One more careless word from me and Adriana would have carried out her threat. And to test the fate of a wife who would or would not do such a thing. I have no desire to do so. Imagine her throwing herself out of a window in front of me. How would I live with that for the rest of my life? I'm in a vicious circle and I don't know how to get out of it. I just don't have the energy." "Okay, well, don't lose heart. I'll think about what to do about the situation." After talking to his mother, Stephen went home, where Adriana was waiting for him. The girl immediately, as soon as she saw her husband, asked why he went to Kathy. The head of the family did not talk about the topic of the conversation, and lied to the chosen one that his mother asked him to come to fix the plumbing. Adriana immediately hinted that the lover lied, since in such cases the mother-in-law always called the master. They invited her son to help. Several days passed. Adriana still saw that Stephen continued to communicate with the former girlfriend, and she gave him a scandal, reminding him that he would kill himself if he did not stop behaving like that. The man, barely containing his irritation, explained to his wife that Betty herself was calling him and asking to talk to her. Adriana offered to let her talk to Betty herself. Stephen only wanted to answer the chosen one. His mother called and asked him to come over. The head of the family, after a short conversation with his mom, said that yes, they are talking on the subject. As soon as he returns from Kathy, Adriana, before leaving, asked what was the occasion for which his mother called him. At this late hour, the man pronounced that he did not know and would tell her when he returned. Soon Stephen was at his mother's house and told her about the altercation with his wife. The man told it all in an irritated tone. Kathy could see that his son really couldn't bear to live like this. The older woman shook her head and said, "I have an idea. Your wife is afraid of losing you. Perhaps she really loves you with some special love, that she is ready to stop living if you are not around. But you can send your spouse to a remote village where there is no cell phone service for a while, ostensibly to heal the daughter, but only for a long time. And it is quite possible that she will meet a man there with whom she will fall in love. This is not a solution, as I sent her to the village to her parents. She lived there for a month and a half and dreamed, and only about me." With bitterness replied the son, "Wait to immediately cancel this option, which I suggested. First, when Adriana was at her parents', there was a connection, and we called every day, not letting each other forget about themselves. And secondly, she was only away for a month and a half, and in my case I proposed to take her to the middle of nowhere for 6 months, while inventing a fairy tale for her." The conspirator mumbled Kathy and looked at his son with a testing look. The man hesitated. The landlady did not hurry him. She realized that Stephen had to think things over carefully to make a decision. About 20 minutes passed before Stephen spoke. He said to his mother, "Perhaps there is truth in what you say, and it is worth the risk of doing something like this. But where would I find such a place? And then how can I persuade Adriana to go there? After all, she will think that I live on her right side on purpose, so that I can have fun in my absence. On the subject of persuasion, then here is my motherly advice to you. For a start, become for a time approximately husband, at least for a month. Give Adriana gifts. Pay as much attention to your daughter as you can. You have to put your spouse's attention to sleep so that she believes that there is harmony in the family again. And by no means even socialize with yourselves. Tell them you're in the middle of a divorce so they won't bug you for a while. Now, as to where to find such a place, I think the ideal would be to take your spouse to a remote village where there is no communication, but there is a witch doctor. This way, you'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On the one hand, maybe this nickname will cure Christina, and on the other hand, you'll probably achieve a painless divorce. And if it doesn't work," barely audible, said Stephen, "then you will live and be happy with your Adriana, whom you chose to marry. You have no other option how to act in this situation. So do it." Stephen thanked his mother for her cooperation and was about to leave. Just then, he remembered that he had promised his wife to tell her why he had called his mother to his house. Kathy laughed and said that her son was still an unreasonable child, although he often changed partners. And then the older woman added that Adriana had to tell part of the truth. The man looked at his mother with incomprehension, who said, "Tell her that you had an explanatory talk with you about the fact that you do not devote enough time to your family, and also scolded you about cheating. Let Adriana think I'm on her side. Now go with God to your beloved." Stephen soon arrived home and was immediately approached by his wife about his trip to his mother. The man told his wife as Kathy had advised, and the head of the household instantly caught the mood of his wife, who was amused. Stephen thought to himself what a wise mother he had Adriana. In turn, mentally thanked her mother-in-law that she did not stand aside and stood up for her. Time moved forward unhurriedly. Adriana could not enjoy family life. Her husband often began to say compliments to her, tried to help with household chores, often played with his daughter, which was previously very rare. All these changes in the behavior of the spouse caused enthusiastic Adriana, and she decided to thank her mother-in-law for her help. The young woman bought a bouquet of flowers and a small cake. Then she called Mother Stephen and asked permission to come over. Kathy said in a unified voice that it was not necessary to warn her about her visit, and she could come whenever she wanted. And a short time later, Adriana was sitting at her mother-in-law's house, saying thank you to the landlady. The elderly woman listened to her daughter-in-law and realized that her son had done the right thing, as the daughter-in-law believed that her spouse had completely changed. And as soon as Adriana stopped talking, the mother-in-law uttered, "I am glad that you are doing well. Now you and your husband need to work on your daughter's health. Maybe find a healer. A lot of people are turning to them these days. You know, my husband just told me that the day before yesterday. You must have told him that, right?" "Yes," Stephen called and we talked about it. "But you're a mother, and you're the only one who can make that decision. I would do anything for my daughter's health. Thank you again for everything. I can't believe we're having this kind conversation right now." Soon, Adriana returned home. She was anxiously awaiting her husband's return. And as soon as Stephen appeared in the apartment, she told him about her visit to her mother-in-law. The head of the family hugged her husband and said that he had made some inquiries and found a healer who lived in a remote village. Adriana looked at her husband with interest and asked him to tell about this healer. The husband sat down in a chair and said that in one village there lived an old man who helped people, but he had to live with him for a while to get rid of the disease. And the man added that there are rumors about this healer that he cures even hopelessly ill people. The girl, hearing this, smiled happily and told her husband that it was necessary to go to this healer. The husband was satisfied, nodded and replied that tomorrow he would contact this grandfather. A day later, Stephen said that he had to go to the old man's village to make arrangements for the healer to see them. Adriana sadly asked the chosen one whether it was impossible to call this man. The head of the family said that there was no connection where the old man lived. There was nothing left for the girl to do but to accept her husband's decision. It was 3 days before Stephen left for the country, and now he had returned home. The man told his wife that the healer was waiting for them. The woman asked how long she would be in the wilderness. Stephen replied that the healer would give her the exact answer. But the same man warned her that it would be at least 2 months for sure. Adriana became upset after these words. This was noticed by the head of the family and asked why she became sad. The girl replied, "We will be with you in separation, and I will not even hear your voice. Think not about that now, but about the fact that we will cure Christina, and you're gonna hear my voice every day. I'm gonna record your speech for you, but you'll get that tape when you're already living at Grandpa's house." Wow, that's a great idea. Now get your things together. We're gonna have to leave soon. You know, it's a good thing we decided to send you and your daughter to this healer over the summer. A few days later, Adriana, her husband and daughter were on their way by car to the village. The woman dreamed of only one thing. That time would fly by, and she would return home with a healthy daughter, and she and her husband would never be separated for such a long period of time again. And Stephen mentally thanked fate that everything was going so smoothly. Soon the car pulled onto the village roads and raced over the bumps. The man mentally thanked that he had to drive on such a broken road. The wife saw that her husband resented it and tried her best to calm him down. After a while, the car entered a small village. Stephen stopped at an extreme hut and asked his wife to stay in the car. He himself got out of the car. Stephen approached the house where he was chopping wood. There was a man in the yard. Adriana's husband approached the stranger. "Hello, sir. We're looking for Christopher. Where can we find him?" "Strangers. You can tell you've come to see him for treatment, but he's not here." It's Thursday, which is the day he goes into town every 2 weeks to get supplies. Today's the day. Can you tell me where his house is? You can tell he's not from around here. He has an old hut here, but he doesn't live here much. Christopher lives in the woods. He's a woodsman and a wanderer in one. Help me get my wife and child there. Christopher knows we're coming. A friend of mine arranged it, but he forgot to tell me that on Thursdays the healer goes into town. And I'll pay you well for this favor. I just don't have time to wait here for a healer. There's plenty of work to do in town. Well, if you pay me, that's good, but you can't get there by car. It's a boat ride down the river. And believe me, that's a lot of gasoline. And I'll tell you right away, I'm not going to wait there for long. I'll just take you back to the village. I've got a lot to do too. I can see that. I'll pay for the gas too. But please do not say anything unnecessary to my wife for this additional payment. The interlocutor looked at Stephen suspiciously and nodded his head. And then the man told him to wait for a while. In the meantime, Stephen went to the car, took out his things, and asked his spouse to get out of the car, explaining to her that they would now drive the motor. Adriana was surprised and wanted to ask him some questions, but he firmly replied that it was not the time to talk. 15 minutes later, the woman and her child were already getting into the motor. Stephen immediately warned that the wigs would not go as he was seasick. Adriana asked her husband in farewell when he would eat them. The head of the household replied that he would arrive here in a month and live here for a week. This message from her husband cheered up the woman's spirits, and she sent him an air kiss. Soon the motor was pumping away from the shore. The woman clasped her daughter to her side and regarded a glimpse of the scenery. She thought about the fact that she would have to spend so much time without the person she loved. The thought made her sad, but the woman tried to shift her attention to the fact that her daughter's health depended on this trip. How long the boat ride Adriana didn't clock, but she felt that her legs had already clocked up. That's when the woman asked the man how much farther to the destination. The counselor replied that one more turn and they would arrive. And already Adriana and her child had landed on dry land. The man pointed to a tube and said that it was necessary to go up on a hill and there would be a healer's hut. Adriana bewilderedly asked the stranger if he would help her carry her things up to the hut. The man nodded reluctantly, picked up the bag and the child's backpack, and walked down the path. And the woman followed him, leading the child by the hand. As soon as they climbed the hillside, the girl saw an unassuming cabin. Then a sheepdog ran up to them and started barking loudly at her. Adriana was frightened and clung to her daughter, who was already crying with fear. The man softly said flatulence to the dog. "Ugh, don't scare the guests." And after these words turned to his companion. "I will lead you into the house, and you will wait there. I don't have time to stay here. I've got a lot to do, and it's a long way home, as you've already noticed. Don't be afraid of the dog. The dog is smart." In a few minutes, the woman and the child were already in the hut. Adriana looked around the house and thought that this was where she would have to spend 2 months, maybe more. The woman was a little stunned. So since she thought she would be living in the village, but it turned out to be in the middle of nowhere. It was already evening when Adriana heard the sound of a motor. She realized that Christopher had arrived. The young woman mentally prepared herself for the meeting with the healer. As soon as the man entered the hut, the girl immediately said hello. The grandfather looked at the guest and not friendly asked what she was doing here. Adriana was confused by this question and inarticulately said that there was an agreement about her arrival. Christopher lit a makeshift lamp, illuminated the woman's face, and then said sternly, "And with whom I wondered that I will have a young person, and even with a child. You are doctors, the hotel, and my husband recently came to you to help us cure our daughter. He said he'd have to stay here for a while. And that's the instruction you gave him. That's the most heresy I've ever heard in my life. All right, I can see the raid already. You're not getting out of the house. You're gonna be here till morning. And then you're gonna show me all of your daughter's medical records. I'll see if there's anything I can do to help, and then we'll decide what to do with you. One more thing, nobody made any arrangements with me about you. Now I'll quickly prepare dinner, then we'll put the baby to bed, and you'll tell me everything in detail. But maybe my friend made arrangements with you through an acquaintance, not directly. With tears in her eyes, said the woman, I have already explained to you that I did not have such a conversation on this topic. Let's understand everything a little later. After these words, the man began to sort out the products that he brought from the city. And then he made a small fire outside, where he piled sausages and potatoes on a frying pan. And after that, Christopher invited the woman and her daughter to have dinner. Soon Christina was put to bed, and the elderly man asked to tell how the woman found herself here. He listened to the guest's story and began to clarify what Stephen had said about him. Then he asked the grandfather a few questions that interested him. Tell me, my dear, if your husband had made an arrangement with me about you, why did I not meet you then? And also, why didn't your husband himself bring you here and wait for me? I don't know. Perhaps you had urgent business and had to leave, and he didn't come here because he's been seasick since childhood. Don't you find your own answers funny? What do you want me to say? I don't understand what's going on. Crying bitterly, the young woman said, Calm down. The grandfather whispered further, so that Adriana would not hear. But it seems to me that I understand everything. The next morning, the old man got up very early. He went to the lake, which was not far from the hut. The grandfather caught fish and boiled some soup, and then went to wake up the woman and the child. Christopher entered the house in a cheerful voice and said that it was time to get up and have breakfast. Adriana did not immediately realize when she woke up. Where was she? The woman looked around confused and immediately remembered yesterday. Adriana wished the healer a good morning and hurried to her daughter, who had already opened her eyes. The elderly man offered to wash her face, guessed from standing water in a bucket, and invited to breakfast. As soon as everyone had eaten, the forester asked for medical documents. He studied them for a long time, and then said that there was hope for recovery, but the treatment needed to be done in stages. Adriana looked fearfully at Christopher and told him how long it would take. The interlocutor, smiling, replied that it would take at least 6 months. The woman shrieked and said, We can't stay in this wilderness without civilization for so long. There are no necessary conditions for a small child to live here, and I am not forcing you to live here. You have to make your own decision. Do you want your daughter to get well or not? That's up to you. I can tell you this about the conditions. During the war, people lived in worse conditions, and mothers would do anything to cure their children. But I have a husband who will worry about me. With tears in her eyes, said the woman. Husband said, Come on. Tell me about your life with him, while I prepare a potion of herbs. For your daughter, only one agreement, that you tell the truth and without any exaggerations. The woman lowered her head and began her story in a quiet voice. The man, meanwhile, was pulling out various pouches from the right basket, which he spread out on a makeshift section on the board. From the outside, it might have seemed that the healer was only busy with his work, but it was not so. Christopher listened attentively to the girl, and as soon as she was silent, said, You know what I'll tell you, dearie. It will sound harsh, but it's true. Your whole life with this Stephen is a misunderstanding. And believe me, you're only here because your husband didn't know how to get rid of you. So when he found out I was helping people, he decided to keep you here. I can even say that your husband is not a stupid man, because he chose a village where there is no communication, so that in the near future you could not contact him. I don't believe that. Stephen and I have an excellent relationship lately. I've even made contact with my mother-in-law, even though I thought it would be impossible. She exclaimed in a passionate tone, Maybe it can't. And your mother-in-law just has a cunning mind. Well, I will not argue with you. I can offer you only one option to live here for a month. I'll be tutoring your daughter during that time. And you wait for your husband, who said he'd visit you. Then we'll see which one of us was right in our speculation. It's up to you. You tell me to take you now. I'll do it, no problem." The woman thought for a moment and then realized that there was some truth in Christopher's words. She agreed to the older man's proposal and immediately asked what she had to do. The man laughed in response and said that the only thing she would be required to do was to cook. And if there is a desire, then watch over the vegetable garden. The girl looked at the forester in amazement and asked a question, "Do you have a vegetable garden here?" "Of course, I live here almost all the time. I only go to the village on Saturday with an overnight stay to receive the sick who occasionally come there. Now I'm going, and I'll show you my grounds." It had been a week since Adriana and her daughter, living in the forest wilderness. The woman tried not to think that her husband could have acted in the way the witch doctor had written. She thought there had been a misunderstanding. It even occurred to her that her husband had simply mistaken the healer and brought her to the wrong person. Adriana waited until a month had passed, and she had traveled to the village to see her husband. The week before she met Stephen, her grandfather did not arrive from the village alone. Adriana and Christina watched Christopher walk out onto dry land. In doing so, he pulled the goat behind him on a rope. This scene made the girl and the woman laugh. They watched as the old man tried to pull the animal onto dry land. It turned out, while doing so, it bumps and vomits loudly. As soon as the elderly man managed to do it, then he lowered himself to the ground and panting, said, "And I thought that the most stubborn animal is a donkey. Turns out I was wrong. This goat," Adriana asked curiously, "why climb into this animal?" The old man grinned and answered that he had long dreamed of a goat because the steamy milk is good for people at his age. And then the man added that Christina also needed to consume this product. Adriana marveled at the words of the healer because he had never brought a goat before. And as soon as the girl appeared, he immediately bought the animal and brought it here. A few weeks passed as the woman lived with Christopher. During this time, she learned how to fish, how to milk the goat. The elderly man himself prepared herbal collections that he gave to the girl from day to day. It was exactly 1 month after Adriana separated from her husband, and the woman started talking in the morning about going to the village. The forester did not interrupt and suggested that they set off immediately. Soon Adriana and her daughter and grandfather were already in the village. They came to the only road that went from the town to the village and sat down on a fallen tree. Adriana often climbed up to see her spouse's familiar automobile, but it was still gone. Hour after hour passed. There was already a bus that came here once a day, but there was no Stephen there either. The woman looked dejectedly at the road and intuitively realized that she would not see her husband today. Adriana turned to Christopher. "Perhaps my husband had arrived earlier when we were on the road. He must have waited for us, and without waiting, left. I don't know what to do now. If you want to spend the night here in my house, I'll take you back to town tomorrow. But my daughter still has to drink your potion for a month. Maybe in a month we'll sail early to the village, and I'll meet my husband. I'm not sure," she suggested. "Have it your way. And now it's time to go to our lair to make it before dark." Time moved on, and another month of Adriana's life in this godforsaken place was approaching. A few days before going to the village, the woman had asked an elderly man why he was dwelling. Here an old man sighed sorrowfully and pronounced that it was a long story. Adriana touched the woodsman's arm and said that she had plenty of time. She asked him to tell her about his life. Christopher made himself comfortable on her and began his story. Christopher was born in a family where his parents worked as doctors, and when he grew up, he also chose the specialty of medicine. But only the young man decided to become a paramedic. He was invited that he would rush in an ambulance to save someone's life. And in a short time, Christopher graduated from the educational institution and got a job. The young man worked a year in an ambulance, and then he got a call. He went to the exit of the patient was a 19-year-old girl, Clara, who had a heart condition. She was rushed to the hospital. As the girl was being wheeled on a gurney to the hospital, Christopher suddenly shook her hand and told her that she would be fine. After this call, several days passed, and the young man could not forget the eyes of that girl, and he decided to visit her. The man easily recognized the ward where the patient was lying and soon stood near the girl's hospital bed with a bag of fruit and a bouquet of flowers. Clara immediately recognized the paramedic and asked him, "What are you doing here?" "I decided to visit the pretty maiden." Don't say flattering words that you don't believe yourself. In my orphanage, they used to call a lock a lid to my face. They're stupid people who didn't see your beauty. And then Christopher, with the girl's permission, sat down next to her, and they began to talk. Initially, the young man told about himself, and then asked the new acquaintance about her life. She was embarrassed and said that she did not have much information to tell about herself. But Christopher insisted on his own, and the girl said that she did not know her parents, as her mother abandoned her in the maternity hospital. After that, she went to an orphanage, where she spent her childhood and adolescence. And after the state allocated her a one-room apartment, and she then went to medical school. After this visit, Christopher more than once came to the girl, and when she was discharged, he himself took from the hospital. From that time, the young people began to meet a month after meeting. The guy confessed his love and offered his hand and heart. The girl responded with consent. And as soon as the man heard the word beloved, he said, "You are my marriage cap for life, and I won't give you to anyone. But there is one thing. I know that you work part-time as a nurse at night. Well, you're quitting tomorrow. That kind of work is not good for you. You study in the morning and work at night. What do you say, future husband?" Soon the couple applied, and then had a modest wedding. Christopher moved to live with his wife, and the young people began to master family life. At first it was not easy, as there was often not enough money. But the newlyweds tried not to fight about it. And strangely enough, they succeeded. After a while, she graduated from college and got a job as a nurse. And at the same time, Christopher expressed a desire to become a doctor of homeopathy. He entered the institute by correspondence, and after some time acquired a profession, on which he began his labor activity. And at the same moment, he learned that his wife was in a position. For the couple, it was a joyful event. They were already dreaming of a baby. After a while, Slaga gave birth to a healthy baby boy, who was named John. The son grew up a healthy boy to the joy of his parents. When John was 3 years old, he was enrolled in kindergarten. Christopher thought that he was the happiest person because he had a woman he loved and a son he loved, as well as a job that gave him pleasure. As the years went by, when John turned 14 years old, his grandparents passed away suddenly within a year. Christopher then moved with his family to live in his father's apartment. It was decided to rent out the one-room apartment and save the money for a summer house. Some more time passed, and John graduated from school with a silver medal and then entered medical school. The parents of the young man were happy for their son and dreamed that he would become a highly qualified specialist in the future. However, the happiness of the family broke overnight. John began to feel ill when John was studying in the 3rd year. The woman was examined and a brain tumor was added to the heart disease. Christopher, as if was crushed by this diagnosis, but the man in no way showed it to his spouse. Soon she was put in the hospital. She lay there for some time, but the attending physician said that it was better to take the woman to a Moscow clinic. Christopher, having collected his savings, immediately went to the capital. The woman underwent many necessary procedures. A lot of money was spent, but nothing helped. She was getting worse day by day. The son demanded that his father take his mother abroad, and Christopher was already ready for this. He sold his car, as well as the dacha, which had recently been purchased, and was preparing for the trip. As he was approached by his wife, who said, "Don't go abroad. I will not survive this trip. You are a medical professional yourself, and you understand everything. I don't have much time left. It is better to leave these finances, son, and do not get angry at him that he insists on traveling abroad. He's still a young and hot guy. As they say, life doesn't burn him. Don't talk nonsense. We'll get you back on your feet," the man said firmly. "Don't talk about it. Try your own strength to cure me. They say love heals. Maybe you can do it. I just want to spend my last days with you and know that my two favorite men are doing well." Christopher looked at the woman he loved and tears involuntarily ran down his eyes, which he could not stop. He realized that she was telling the truth about the fact that his wife had only a few days to live, but it hurt him that his beloved knew about it. After all, she's a doctor. And Clara, seeing the tears of her husband, quietly said, "Do not mourn for me if I go to the next world, then with a peaceful soul, because we lived a life worthy. You better buy a house somewhere and let me spend the rest of my days there, where you will feed me with healing creatures." "All right, my love, I will." Christopher told his son of his decision. John, when he found out that his father was going to go to the backwoods instead of abroad, was furious. They had a big fight between them, and in the meantime, Christopher quit his job, and he was already the head of the hospital there. And then he found a small village where he bought a small house and moved there with his wife. The woman lived in the village for a little over 6 months. Christopher prepared a potion for his wife, but realized that it was all useless. And often at night, when the chosen one fell asleep restless son, he went out into the yard and quietly whimpered because he could not change the situation. Died in the early morning, but before that the woman managed to say that she loved her son and Christopher very much, and also asked her husband to bury her in this area. She said it was beautiful and easy to breathe. After these words, she took a deep breath and fell asleep forever. Christopher fulfilled his wife's request and stayed here for good. He did not want to leave his native and beloved man alone after 2 years, as he did not become a wife. A man in the city learned the courses of a forester and got a job in the forestry, having moved into the wilderness. After this story, Christopher looked at Adriana, who was sitting, breathless, and tears were streaming down her face. It was as if the young woman could feel how this older man had gone to any lengths to be with his beloved forever. The forester touched Adriana's arm and looked at her carefully. The girl did not know what to say to this man, nor could she, since there was a lump in her throat. Christopher patted Adriana's hand and said that the time was late and it was time to go to bed. A few days passed, and Adriana and her grandfather and Christina went to the village again. The woman did not really hope to see her husband again. She didn't understand why she felt this way. The forester's story kept replaying in her mind, and Adriana involuntarily thought that it was Christopher's story that prevented her from believing that her husband would appear before she got into the motor. The girl suddenly inquired of the elderly man, "Does the son know that it was Clara who wished to settle in the village?" The grandfather looked sadly at Adriana and shook his head negatively. And then he heard another question from the woman he was talking to. "How often do you see John?" "We parted in an uneasy relationship. I've lived here for almost 12 years now. And in that time, John has been twice. Every 4th year he comes for 3 days. My son told me himself that he would come every 4 years. Why that number, I don't know. He's supposed to come next summer." Soon the man, woman, and child were already in the village and sitting in the tree again. Adriana did not jump up to see if a car was coming along the road. Then a man passed by them who was taking Adriana and her daughter to the place where the healer lived. The girl told this to Christopher, who immediately stopped the fellow villager and said, "Do you not remember? Prokopovich took this person with a child to me a couple of months ago." "I remember, of course." "What happened? Tell me how he acted. I can voice it in front of the young lady." "You're not sure?" asked Lawson. "You can, and you should," Adriana said boldly. "He was a strange guy. He paid double cab fare and told me not to say anything to his wife. I thought he was coming with us to take his wife to her destination. He's got some kind of seasickness thing going on. Any reasonable man wouldn't let a beautiful woman go alone with a stranger." "You see what he did," Lawson said. Christopher looked at Adriana, who smiled sadly, and then said that it was time to go back to the goat. And then she added that it was very difficult to milk in the dark. The woman took her daughter by the hand and went first to the river. As soon as they reached the motor, The forester turned Adriana to face him and said, "I understand that you have made conclusions for yourself. What are you going to do? Treat my daughter further. You said that 2 months to drink from Varia, and then a month of rest. That's 2 months gone. Now we'll take an active vacation." Trying not to cry, mumbled a young woman. "Do you mean that you are ready to live here for a few more months?" "Of course I am. It's all for my daughter's health. You don't understand. As in your life story. I've had my whole soul ripped out of me. I would have done anything to live with Stephen. I couldn't imagine living without him. And I realize now that he doesn't need me or my daughter. After all, a loving man would have wanted to know how his wife and daughter were living all this time. And here is silence. You left everything for your beloved and came here. You had a prestigious position in the city, surely a good position in society, and even the desire of the woman you love went to conflict with his own son. And I have nothing to expect from Stephen, since I'm nothing to him. I'm sure this man is now tumbling around with my ex-girlfriend, and he's free to keep it that way. What's important to me right now is to cure Christina, and then we'll see how I move on. You need to think about your decision with a clear head. And they're emotional right now. Now let's go home. It is really uncomfortable to milk in the dark," the old man said in reply. The next morning, Adriana was the first to get up. She went out of the hut and looked at the nature. She liked to contemplate the forest and breathe in the fresh air. And at that time, Christopher approached her quietly and asked her how she had slept last night. The girl turned to the older man and answered that she had slept better than ever. And then the forester asked, "Now you must decide for sure whether you will stay here or be taken to town. You need to know that now, because very soon summer will be over and fall will come. It can be hard to get out of here. It's often hard to get out here. It rains so hard that the river overflows its banks, and in winter there is a blizzard that you don't want to show your nose from your hut. I told you yesterday I'm staying. You taught me how to fish, and now it's time for me to learn how to hunt. Although I guess it's not really my thing. If you've made up your mind, you're a good girl. Now it's just a matter of building a barn for the goat, making hay, and of course, buying you appropriate clothing for the season. There's something for you in my lake car stuff, if you're not squeamish, of course. Christina, on the other hand, will have to buy everything new. Of course, I won't be squeamish. What are you talking about? You know, I feel bad. I don't even have the money to pay for it. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the engagement ring and the gold earrings Stephen gave me. You could pawn all that jewelry and you'd have money. Stop talking nonsense. I have the means. How much do I need on my own? I haven't spent much over the years. I wanted to give it to my son. I gave it to him, and he gave it back to me. So save your gold for a rainy day. Next Thursday, we'll go into town, do a little shopping. We'll get Christina a doll and buy her some books. And I made the Barbie nursery myself. It won't be worse than the store ones. Time flew by. Autumn passed, and then winter came. Adriana enjoyed watching the seasons change, and in each month she found its own charm. What did the latter man often talk about? The elderly man listened to her interlocutor and told her that she had a talent for writing. Because of the way she painted colorfully the seasons, soon it was spring. The man started the vegetable garden. Adriana was helping him with it. Christina also demanded that the adults give her a job. Christopher, in order not to offend the child, gave the girl millet and asked her to pick it. Initially, Christina did it with passion, but soon she got bored with it and demanded a shovel. This statement puzzled the forester, and he promised the child that as soon as Thursday came, he would buy her a children's set of vegetable gardeners and set aside a special place for planting. Spring flew by and summer came. The young woman already realized that it was impossible to stay here forever. In just a couple of years, Christina would have to go to school. Adriana knew that Christopher was thinking about it, too, who had already gotten used to having Adriana and the little girl, whom he loved as his own granddaughter, living next to him. So Adriana decided that it was time to talk to the forester about her return to town. She was going to do it in the morning, but as soon as she got up, she saw that the old man was going shopping. And she damned their news to herself, since she had completely forgotten that it was Thursday and her grandfather was going to town. The elderly man asked what to buy, and the girl quickly wrote a list of groceries, which she held out to Christopher. Soon the forester sailed off to the motor. The woman decided to clean up the hut, the more so her daughter was busy drawing. The girl collected half and raised the floors, then washed everywhere and looked over her work. After that, Adriana began to prepare the first course. She habitually made a fire and put water on the fire in the column. Somehow she heard the roar of a motor. The girl thought that another fisherman went fishing. However, the motor swam to the shore and a middle-aged man came out of it. The stranger looked at the young woman with surprise and asked what she was doing here. Adriana was outraged by this question. And Adriana said, "You are the one who owes me an explanation as to why you came here." "Good acquaintance. Well, I'll start by explaining. I'm here to visit Christopher's father." The young woman stared at the forester's son with all her eyes and then splayed her hands and said loudly, "So you are John," and immediately added sternly, "Good son. He doesn't know what's wrong with his father. And he comes once every 4 years. Wow, I'm getting hit on by a wood nymph. This is a very interesting situation." The man said with a chuckle, "I won't stop you from having fun. Tell the father that his son came," and he opened. John stopped talking as he saw Christina come out of the house. The man was silent for a while, but then he said, "And this is my father, who pretends to be a devoted husband to my mother when he has already made a child." After these words, John turned around and went to the motor. And immediately afterwards I heard, "Such asses as you, it is necessary to search for more. Your father is a golden man who still loves Clara. That's the only reason he lives here and doesn't move to the city. And you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking so badly of your own father." "What did you say? You don't know anything. Dad brought Mom here when the doctors could have helped her." And the man was interrupted at the same moment by Adriana, who said in a calmer voice, "Shut up, ignoramus, and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Your mother knew she was going to die soon, and it was she who persuaded your father to bring her here. I don't know why I kept it from you, Christopher, but I can tell you with certainty that I have never seen such love as that between your parents." And then the young woman was already telling about herself, how the couple got here after they learned about each other and remembered their acquaintance and laughed. And then the girl asked what John hadn't said when she interrupted him. The man smiled and said that he wanted to inform his father that he now had his own clinic. And at the same moment the couple heard a motor pull up, out of which Christopher got out with his bags. The elderly man saw his son and wept, and at the same time John rushed towards him and began to apologize for being such a stupid man. Soon Adriana was leaving the forester, but not only in the company of his daughter, but also John. The healer's son promised his father that he would show the girl to specialists and in the near future report on the results of treatment. And as it turned out, healing courage actually helped Christina, since the tests turned out to be good. Several years have passed. During this time, Adriana divorced Stephen and married John. They had a child together. It was a boy who was named Ignat. The couple took turns telling Adriana's parents during the summer and then going to the countryside to visit John's father. Only now Adriana realized that she had met a worthy man whom she loved with all her heart and was confident in him in every way. John felt the same way and often recalled their unusual acquaintance, which had almost turned into enmity. And on one of the days of such memories, Adriana said to her husband, "You know, I really want to go to the city where I started college. That's where Christina was born. And I promised I'd show you those places. What's the big deal? You promised. You keep your promise. We'll go through this town, especially since we're on our way to your parents' house, and then to my father's, right?" Happily said the woman and kissed her spouse on the lips. And soon the family was already driving a Jeep in the town where Christina was born. The woman asked her husband to park the car and walk. The man complied with the request of his beloved, and in a few minutes the family was already standing on the street. Adriana corrected her sundress. Unshaven took Christina under the arm and offered to walk. John took the 4-year-old son by the hand, and they slowly headed down the street. Just then, Adriana heard a loud exclamation, to which she turned around. The woman looked at the man and recognized him as her ex-spouse. She coldly rolled her eyes at him and wanted to continue on her way. But Stephen exclaimed that he was glad for the unexpected meeting and began showering Adriana with compliments and said that he recognized Adriana only by the tattoos she had made for him, and then pointed at Christina and asked, "This is my daughter. Hear that, banker? At one time you took your wife's bored child to the middle of nowhere and left for a mistress. And now, years later, when there was a chance meeting, you decided to pretend to be a father. That's not gonna happen. Christina has been calling my husband, who is standing next to me, Daddy for a long time. And about the tattoo, thank you for reminding me to look at it soon. Now go on your way and forget about us forever."